Welcome to another episode of Bitcoin Magazine Live. I'm your host Q, coming to you once again from my mother's basement, and I'm joined by my co-host P. How goes it, P?
As always, it goes fantastically. Excited to dive in today. Who do we have as a guest?
We have Rafa. I'm spacing on his last name and trying to look it up in real time.
Nailed it.
Rafa from IBEX Mercado. Rafa Cordon. Okay, I thought it was Cordon. All right, cool. Rafa Cordon would be joining us in about 30 minutes. And then, of course, it is Wednesday and it is the FOMC meeting day. So we are having a special episode of Fed Watch that will be kicking off at 2 p.m., 3 p.m. Eastern time. And of course, we're going to kick things off with some news and notes. So let's begin with some Bitcoin Magazine news on this Wednesday, November 2nd. And I want to address an ongoing rumor that's going around the Twitter sphere and mainstream Western media. And it is a rumor that Saudi Arabia has reached out to the U.S., warning the U.S. that Iran plans to bomb Saudi Arabia imminently. This was as of yesterday, and the reports have now changed to in the next 48 hours. The price of oil has shot up. There's growing concern. What could this mean? I'm just going to throw a few little thought nuggets into your brains, people. Why this story? Why this story is the one that people are, oh yeah, the media and the news got this one right. Everything else, I don't believe, I don't like, but this story where they attack Iran and they say Iran's the bad guy, I believe that. I'm not saying you're racist, but you're racist. There's a second larger issue going on here. And I've spoken very openly about this for a long time. The amount of oil that Iran has in its reserves would quell and just absolutely ruin the price of oil in the global market, decreasing it and making oil far more affordable. And a country like Saudi Arabia that has really gotten us by the balls with the price of oil stands to lose the most should the revolutions in Iran be successful enough that Western countries accept Iranian oil. Point blank. So let's not fucking kid ourselves. Let's not buy into this media narrative, because I'm telling you right now, this is only something being reported by Western media to use as a justification to try to drop bombs on yet another Middle Eastern country. I ask you and urge you, instead of just buying into the crazy narratives, you take a moment to think, who stands to benefit the most should certain situations play out?
I think that's great.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Q, to your point, like, we disbelieve media 99% of the time, but the 1% of the time we believe it, it's right fucking now. I mean, I think that's a perfect example. What's it called? Isn't it called like the Gilman amnesia effect, where like, if you're an expert in something, like if they're writing about Bitcoin, we're like, you're fucking idiots, you know nothing. But then if they report on exactly the Iran-Saudi Arabia conflict, they're like, oh, they know everything. This is correct. Like it's where you're an expert in your field, you strike it down, where if you're not an expert, you believe the journalist all of a sudden. So I find it very, very funny.
I love that we're just fully claiming we are Bitcoin experts. Now, I mean, we certainly know more than most, but I completely agree with you, Q. I think it's also important that we acknowledge that we all do this, right? To your point, Chris, this isn't you're not railing against Bitcoiners specifically. I think you're challenging all of us to hold ourselves to the same high standard that we, on all information sources, that we hold other people to when they talk about Bitcoin, which I think is fantastic. It's an important reminder. We're all guilty of it, and we got to be better.
Let's take it back to Bitcoin.
Let's fucking go. Elon Musk, he is in the news once again. Of course, most recently, as we've been talking about on the show, because of his acquisition of Twitter. He's fired a bunch of people. He is trolling as usual. Most recently, he tweeted about the Twitter verification process. Specifically, and so he basically has been talking about how he's going to charge a monthly fee to allow people to be verified on Twitter. And Jack Mallers clapped back and said very poignantly something that I'm just going to read verbatim because it's fantastic. He said, so Elon Musk tweeted, Twitter's current lords and peasant system for who has or doesn't have a blue check market is bullshit. Power to the people. Blue for $8 a month. And then Jack Mallers responded, Lightning and instant plus near free Bitcoin payments should be an accepted payment method. It would allow for global, inclusive, private payments, important for pseudonymous users, that are cash final, no chargebacks. Services like Cash App already support these payments. He said, my company Strike partnered with Twitter already to enable lightning tips. We even offer the ability to settle these payments in USD, so there is no extra lift for Twitter. Settles and reported like a card. This could be implemented in days, given that we already have a partnership. It's a fantastic point. There's no reason why this shouldn't be the case. And I love that Jack Mallers just came in, mic drop, bounced out. There's been a couple very funny Twitter threads around this. The Bitcoin community rallied, and on this post just started posting like, take my sats, let me pay in sats, let me pay in sats. There's hundreds and hundreds of replies to Elon Musk's tweet thread about this. To be clear, I'm not going to pay in sats for this feature, but we should be able to 100%.
Let me ask you guys this, because, none of us have a blue check mark, but will you be paying $8 a month for your blue check?
Fuck.
I know Chris will, because Chris has always been impressed by the low follower profiles with blue check marks.
Nah, dude, I'm a man of the people. The plebs account.
Man of the people. No, I won't. I also think that the verification app, part of the reason that the blue check mark was so interesting to people was because of the scarcity around it, as is the case in all things. Scarcity rules the roost. So if this functionality is added, then it simply dilutes the pool. It's less interesting, less compelling, and who cares?
I think it was like an artificial scarcity, though. Like, I'll give a point for Elon here. Like, basically with him saying, like, it's bullshit, their system. Like, some people that are like, hey, like, I meet all the criteria, and they refuse to get verified, where then, like, a random no-name
they refuse
journalist,
to allow verification.
Yeah, refuse to allow verification. Then this no-name journalist that works for CNBC with, like, 2,000 followers gets a blue check. No questions asked. No issue.
Chris is so salty.
Nah, I just have more followers than them. That's all I'm just saying.
I will never forget, one of my first ever interactions with Chris was he was like looking through some of the other Bitcoin magazine colleagues and saw some of our colleagues had blue check marks, but they had blue check marks and only like 1,000 followers or like 10,000 followers. And he genuinely turned to us and was like, I've never seen people be verified with such few followers.
Well,
I will never forget that.
To his point, though, it used to be, it was, and Elon Musk, so I hate to give him credit for anything, but yeah, it's totally random. Like, people that met the criteria wouldn't have check marks. And then, lots of people were trying to game the system, figure out how to do it. We talked yesterday with John Carvalho. If you haven't seen that episode, you haven't watched it yesterday, go watch it. It's awesome. He talked about how the Twitter check mark is not actually, it's basically just verifying your identity. And he talked about how you can hack that. You used to be able to hack it by simply creating a fake like spoof account and then, submitting them as a, not spoof, but you know what I mean? Like an imposter. And then they would ask you for your driver's license. And then once you submitted your driver's license, they would mark you as verified. So it's just it's just a system that was, being gamed constantly. But yeah, there's no reason this shouldn't be available through sats. Unfortunately, I think what's going to happen is Twitter is going to embrace the entire crypto ecosystem. We saw this, in the people that Elon Musk brought on to, help advise Twitter, Eric Voorhees, all these shitcoiners. So I fully expect this to be something where if they were to add Bitcoin, which they could do trivially, as Mahler's pointed out, they're going to add in other things as well. So such is life.
I still want my blue check mark, but I won't be paying $8 a month for it. Today, as we mentioned, is the FOMC meeting. We are anticipating a 75 basis point rate hike. It is coming in as of this morning at a 90% likelihood. I mean, I'm trying to just, calm myself and prepare myself for the fact that I somehow was born in the day and age where, and this moment in my life where I'm supposed to build my wealth for my future, the entire monetary system of the entire world comes down to what? 12 white guys in a room deciding what to do.
There's two women. I will give them that, but
white women. I want to emphasize it's all white people.
It's pronounced white women.
White women. A bunch of white women or 2 white women and then 10 white men get to decide what happens to your money, my money, and the world's money. I look forward to the days where I sit my grandchildren down and tell them about this antiquated system that we all helped tear down. Um, Candidly, I think the markets have been so spot on that it would be almost silly to expect anything else. I say that, and watch me eat my words this afternoon in the middle of our interview when the rate hike comes in at 50 basis points. That said, today's press conference with Jerome Powell afterwards will be vital to just see how the rhetoric he spews out is received by the market. We've already seen some sort of testing of certain criteria, like, oh, we may slow down rate hikes sooner than anticipated. The market responded very positively to that. So remains to be seen. Buckle up. We still got 2 more months in 2022, and I don't think we're done with the wild and craziness. Chris, any thoughts ahead of that FOMC meeting?
It's pretty funny that I don't know. We're just waiting on bated breath for one white man to come out and give us the interest
Weird
rate.
when you say it.
Yeah. As a white man, I don't think you should call out other white men, but
I call out other white men. Jerome Powell basically sets the interest rate for not just the U.S. but for the world. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's a crazy system. I'd rather Bitcoin system of every 10 minutes a new block spits out, or around every 10 minutes. I think that's a better system, more fair system. But that's just me.
Yeah. But
Here.
In the vein of Bitcoin and not Bitcoin, what the hell is going on with the Circle?
So their CEO, Jeremy Allaire, is not going to make it. Because why? He wants you to buy his shitcoin. So fuck Bitcoin, buy my shitcoin, Jeremy Allaire. That's the quote. That's it. No, there's actually more to this. He said, you should trade in all your Bitcoin for USDC. Stablecoin creator and CEO of Circle says, by 2026, it's going to zero. So he said this a few years ago, back in 2016. But he is still a proponent of buy my shitcoin, sell your Bitcoin. That's just him. It's pretty funny that this comes after we talked about financial inclusivity, and he just fucking OFAC compliant, like all the fucking people on Tornado Cash. So I know it's a different implementation, different shitcoin. We don't need to go there. We've talked about it enough. But, he's very much like, oh yeah, sell your Bitcoin. So then we can cut you off the financial system. Sounds like a bank account with digital dollars. Sounds like a central bank digital currency. But I digress. QP, what are your thoughts?
Fuck these people.
I really hope people weren't giving him Bitcoin in exchange for USDC, because this man's bag just got fatter and fatter because you did that. I wonder what your guys' thoughts are if the impending imminent collapse, in my opinion now, of Circle will really leave regulators in a tough spot when it comes to things like stable coins in the future. We saw the Lunaterra debacle from earlier this year really harm a lot of people. We've seen conversations circulate as a result, or from regulators saying we can't let things like that happen again. My question to you, if something happens with USDC, do you anticipate regulators taking a far more aggressive position against stablecoins than they have thus far?
I guess expand with what you mean by a bigger thing with USDC. What do you mean by that?
If something were to happen where USDC turns out to be like a full-blown rug, or it goes to zero, or just something where like it is not actually a stable coin because it's a fucking scam.
I guess I'll add, obviously we saw Lunaterra collapse. I think there's investigations, probes have been opened up again against Terras. Tethers. There we go. Yeah, no, not Tether. Tether's founders. So the IRS was probing Tether again. They're bringing up an old investigation. I believe this was from a couple days ago. So I didn't want to comment on it because I didn't see any more news on it. But they are apparently going after the Tether, saying it's not fully backed 1-to-1, and they're some weird banking probes. It's definitely something that we're going to see developing. But yeah, to your point, Q, like if they might go after USDC and be like, hey, like we need to regulate this more, or maybe JP Morgan gives the regulators some kickback and say, hey, welcome into our ecosystem. I don't know.
I'm not going to lie. I do not pay attention very much to the stablecoin ecosystem. I don't have a super strong opinion about USDC and all that stuff. But to answer your specific question, Q, 100% the powers that be will not let a good crisis go to waste. and they are actively working to control the narrative and to undermine the use of unofficially sanctioned, quote unquote cryptocurrencies. So again, the powers that be, centralized financial systems and centralized governments are very threatened by the financial freedom that Bitcoin offers and systems that interact with Bitcoin. And so they're going to do everything they can to undermine that from a legislative and regulatory perspective, and also from a narrative perspective. So 100% you should expect this to be utilized if it goes south. The other thing that, just touching on the story we talked about yesterday, again, is, the reason that the Department of Homeland Security has invested so heavily in these fucked up backdoor systems with, Facebook, Twitter, Wikipedia, which was a surprising one to me, is because if you can control the information that people are able to consume, if you can control the information that they are exposed to in a quote unquote public platform, if you can manipulate that to promote specific narratives, as has come out and we talked about yesterday, then you can control what they think. You can control how people are able to view the world around them. And so we spend a lot of time kind of dunking on people who don't understand what's going on. I think we sort of reinvest in taking responsibility as Bitcoiners. And I would challenge everyone that's listening to this show to not view people who don't understand yet as enemies, view them as people who are being caged in by the powers that be, and take it as a moral imperative to help free them from these shackles. Just because you don't understand how awesome Bitcoin is does not mean that you don't need it. And there's a lot we can do.
Just to be clear, Jeremy Allaire, the founder of Circle, does understand Bitcoin.
100%.
Does deserve us dunking on him. Just
100%.
Be perfectly clear. Okay.
Thank you for clarifying. Fuck him.
Cool. Just wanted to be on the same page. Chris, unless you had anything else, I wanted to talk some comps, but it looks like Bitcoin is more secure than your bank. And I literally mean any U.S. bank that you bank at. Why? The U.S. banks, turns out, spent $1 billion on ransomware payments in 2021, the Treasury says. Yeah, good luck hitting up the Bitcoin CEO and asking for ransomware payments, guys. Although, look, it is worth highlighting and noting that if you don't self-custody and you leave your Bitcoin on an exchange, and that exchange does get hacked with some ransomware attack, you probably did lose your Bitcoin. So,
because you never owned it. That's the key point. Not your keys, not your coin. Take your Bitcoin off an exchange. Do so as you are ready to. Educate yourself. Go through the proper steps. Don't just get all freaked out and go lose your Bitcoin. But if you do not hold the private keys to your Bitcoin, you do not own any Bitcoin. You own an IOU, and it's going to get taken away from you eventually.
Well said. Alrighty, let's talk some mining.
Yes. Mining indeed. So we talked about Core Scientific, and they're one of the, if not the largest miner right now. They have become insolvent. They have recently tapped restructuring lawyers as the company weighs potential bankruptcy. So specifically, a group of Core Scientific convertible bondholders is working with restructuring lawyers at Paul Hastings as the company weighs potential bankruptcy, according to people with knowledge of the situation. This was an interesting week last week because everybody was rattled as they put out public statements warning everybody that they were on track to run out of cash by the end of the year, and that they might seek relief by declaring bankruptcy. The company's stock dropped 20 cents when they made that announcement. So the plot continues, the plot thickens. What do you guys think about this? Do you think this is a significant moment in this story, or do you think it's basically just another, like, yeah, we should expect this? Obviously, they're going to be talking to these types of lawyers as they go forward.
I mean, like, truthfully, what was it? Mashinsky and that gang did the same thing to a degree. Like, they hired bankruptcy lawyers. Like, this is just sort of that next expected step.
Does this signal anything? Is there a significance, and I'm asking this genuinely, is it significant that they are talking to restructuring lawyers versus a different type of lawyer? Are there other types of lawyers that they could be talking to in the situation that would indicate something else to the market?
So they could literally have gone to a bankruptcy lawyer, and that to me would have just been like, all right, we messed up, like we give up, like we're gonna just declare bankruptcy and like start our next project, our next endeavor. So it tells me that they are still invested in the core business, pun intended. Um, how they get back to that, how they restructure to hold on to what they want to hold on to, that will be very interesting and telling. And I think that will be more important than just, oh, they're hiring someone to restructure. The signal this sends is we still want to be involved in mining Bitcoin. In what capacity, how we do that remains to be seen. If they had brought on a bankruptcy lawyer, they would have just been like, yeah, we fucked up a little too much. We're not going to be able to recover this. So, like, sorry, guys, we'll sell off what we can, make it on what we can, and then we're going to go off and do something else.
Yeah. I want to add one more thing. They only had 24 Bitcoins on their balance sheet. I know we brought up this story a while ago, so I don't expect this to affect Bitcoin's price. But if you're looking to get into mining and there's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of miners going to go onto the market with them trying to restructure, it's a very, very good time to try and go into the mining space if you're looking to do that. So very, very cool. There's a lot of opportunity for it, which is very exciting as well. The one more thing that I wanted to say, the cost of an S19 XP, which is the top of the line equipment, the cost to build it is $1,800. Right now, I was looking at Kaboom Racks, and it's anywhere from like $2,200 to $2,500. So obviously, someone's not going to sell less than the cost that it costs to make those. So we're near the bottom of what Bitcoin miners can be. I guess if you're really distressed and you have to sell below it, but like $1,800 is pretty much the floor if like the cost to literally put together the parts and all that. So that's just my 2 cents on it. It could go lower briefly, but they'd be quite literally taking a loss on it. So I don't know. Any thoughts there, guys?
No, I'd just like to also remind everyone that the total amount of Bitcoin that they liquidated is also equivalent to the total amount of cash they still hold on hand. How crazy would it be if they come out and they start mining like some shitcoin after this?
That would be pretty crazy.
Not going to happen.
Chris, let's talk MicroStrategy. We haven't talked about them in a while.
Yeah, so MicroStrategy. So they report an impairment charge of $727,000. What's this mean? So in Bitcoin holdings for Q3. So we have talked about in the past that Bitcoin MicroStrategy has about 130,000 Bitcoins on their balance sheet. With GAAP accounting rules, when Bitcoin's price goes down, they have to mark down their income statement, meaning that they made less money even though they're holding it on their balance sheet. It's a really weird accounting rule for digital assets. Normally, you're allowed to just report down your balance sheet side of things and not take a hit on the income side of things. The Financial Accounting Standards Board put out a press release a couple weeks ago saying, hey, that we should change from these GAAP accounting rules for digital assets, specifically Bitcoin, and you should allow, it's called fair value accounting instead, which is they just write it down on their balance sheet side instead of their income statement. I know that's kind of confusing, but one's the income coming into the business, one is the assets on your business. While the CFO, Andrew Kang, said that this is a very positive thing and very optimistic for this in the future, Michael Saylor said, while we agree that this is optimistic and we're very happy about it, there was no regulatory guidance that comes with this. And them being a multi-billion-dollar corporation, were not comfortable enough changing their accounting rules as is to go with the fair use accounting principles instead of GAAP accounting. I'm sure they would love to do it, but I'm sure their legals and accountants were like, hey, just because this financial committee said they can do this, we do not have regulatory clarity or regulatory buy-in for us to just change our whole accounting system. So they'll probably be working with regulators to build this fair use accounting tool and get regulatory clarity themselves, being in the industry. But I think long term, this will be very beneficial to not just them, but other corporations that want to hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet. QP, what are your thoughts?
This is actually very significant because for some time, Bitcoin holders in the public markets have kind of been, just to be crass about it, like fucked over. The way the laws are in place, they're just sort of left only reporting their gains, but then they can't write off their losses. Truthfully, though, this is just more reflective on our entire industry as a whole. There's no tried and true like this is how every publicly traded company needs to report these different line items. And companies are very creative with how they do it. So I don't want to be a dick about it to bring this part of it up, but there is also something really important to point out and just realize and remember. MicroStrategy got dinged about 20 years ago for fraud and got really screwed over. Their stock price still, even at the peak during the COVID Bitcoin run, their stock price was nowhere near what it was during the 2001 dot-com bubble. They got in so much trouble with regulators over the way they handled their internal accounting that it is not surprising that Saylor wants to get ahead of this and try actually to figure out an agreed upon system with these same regulators to avoid any headaches in the future, because he anticipates that. And I think that's a very smart thing to do. I just have a hard time believing that there will be an agreed upon industry standard of how this will be done. Like that's just where this sort of, I'm like, this is really admirable. I applaud you guys, and I hope this comes of something. My expectations are just like, nah.
I think they'll agree on a standard specifically for Bitcoin. Crypto, it might be more muddied, but I don't know. I still think it's a few years away. But Q, to your point, I think this is Saylor showing his maturity and being like, hey, like, I don't want to fuck around with this. We've dealt with this issue in the past. So we'll wait to get some regulatory clarity.
I want to just caveat what you just said, though, Chris. It may be muddier for crypto versus Bitcoin. In my opinion, only so long as Gary Gensler is in the government. Like, the second Gary Gensler is gone, you run the risk of having the new chairman of the SEC essentially be an anti-Bitcoin person. And candidly, like, I think we should start to expect exactly that. We don't have as many friends in DC as we'd like to believe that we do. And there's an election next week that could actually decide the fate of both the House and Senate. And depending on which party either retains or regains control of those, like, we should appreciate Gary Gensler while we have him, is all I'm saying.
Just correct me if I'm wrong, but Gary Gensler was picked by Biden. So even if the House and the Senate change, he would still remain in his chair unless something changes drastically.
No, his term limit is, I'm trying to confirm. So this is very, okay. So his term will be for the 4 years. So or a 5-year term. So even after 2024, he will still be in power. But it is important to just remind you that, say, I can't believe these words are about to leave my mouth, but say Biden got reelected in 2024 and then decides to re-up Gary Gensler, but does not have control of the House and Senate. The House and Senate has to validate whoever he puts in. So it could just be like one of those headache situations of, we don't want to push forward any Biden nominees. And then in turn, we lose Gary Gensler, the one voice and advocate of Bitcoin, keeping regulators at bay for now, at least. I know I cannot believe that I called Gary Gensler a friend of Bitcoiners, but that is where we are.
I think he's definitely more friendly than most.
I mean, he celebrated Bitcoin White Paper Day with the rest of you.
Yeah, but his tweet was bullshit. He was like, this is why we need regulation and safety for the people. And that infuriated me.
Fair.
That's what you say when you want to put somebody into a tiny little box so that you can control them.
I mean, is that not the job of all governments around the world?
I think that is it's painting with a broad brush, but 100% you're right.
Fair. I mean, you know me, I like to paint with a broad brush. But let's talk another crypto hack. Crypto exchange Deribit's hot wallet was hacked for $28 million. I just think the one takeaway you need to take from this, ladies and gentlemen, A, this is not financial advice, do your own due diligence, but B, self-custody is so vitally important. So vitally important. Except with cryptos. Like, if you're going to go shitcoin around, like, you deserve to get whatever happens to you, in my opinion. But please, if you are buying and holding Bitcoin, do not just leave it on your exchange. Take the time, learn what self-custody is, learn how to use various types of wallets, both hot and cold wallet, and play around with it. Get to know it, because eventually you're going to have to spend that Bitcoin somehow, some way. And let me tell you, better to learn how to do it now when you don't actually need to very desperately try to sell money to raise money for other things like I had to do months ago. That headache is painful. Do it.
Is this for the third? Was this for the third kidney surgery you had? You had an additional kidney implanted in your body so that later you could sell it when you wanted to buy more Bitcoin? I advised against it, but you did it anyway.
No, I actually, like, my girlfriend was really mad at me over the weekend. I listed all of her furniture on like different platforms. We sold everything. And she came back from the gym and she was like, wait, where's all my furniture? I was like, well, I bought Bitcoin with it.
You fucked up.
This actually did happen. So,
oh my God. You animal. I'm here for it. Let's fucking go. You should have sold yourself as well. Sold your body to the night, put on that red light, made some more Bitcoin. One thing I want to comment on is Deribit is interesting because there are two major platforms where one has been able to buy and sell options contracts on Bitcoin. Deribit is the most popular one in Europe, and Ledger X, recently acquired by Bitcoin crypto Hoover, Sam Bankman-Fried, FTX, was the other one. So there's Ledger X, Ledger X, and Deribit. These are terrible platforms. It's literally just gambling. Don't get wrecked. But the fact that Deribit, which is the larger of the two, was hacked in this way is very interesting. They also put out a tweet saying that their hot wallet was compromised. They said the client funds are safe and the loss is covered by company reserves. But as you said, this is yet another example of why one should take custody of their own keys. They also said in their release on Twitter that their policy is to have 99% of assets in cold storage, of customer assets in cold storage, which is pretty interesting. I don't know how the average exchange does that, but I thought that was an interesting bit of information as well. Could be fluff. They could just be saying that, but yeah, don't get wrecked, friends.
Cool.
The last item. I think we're going to do this. Halloween.
Yes.
So
we had a fun little Halloween costume contest for anyone who was under a rock and wasn't paying attention to our Twitter account, where the winner gets a free ticket to Bitcoin 2023, which is going back to Miami, May 18th to the 20th. You could use promo code BMLive to get 10% off. The winner got a free ticket, and the second and third place runner-ups will receive a free issue of the Orange Party Edition, which is now being mailed out as we speak. So I'll start with the second and third place winners. Second and third place will go to Crypto Cloaks for his or her Hodl costume, as well as the Orange Pill Pharmacist for their Orange Pill costume.
Wait, these costumes are amazing. Are we able to call these up on screen? Do we have
Chris,
this facility?
can you pull these up?
I don't know if I have the time to pull them
up.
Fuck!
All right, my friends.
We'll tweet them out.
Their costumes are amazing.
The winner.
You got to describe the costumes, Q. Use your incredible powers of oration. Describe them in detail. I want to feel this. Paint me a word picture.
Crypto Cloaks dressed up as Hodl. There's your word picture for that one.
Beautiful.
And then the Orange Pill Pharmacist to me, it looks like an M&M. Do we get it on screen? All right, yeah. So that's the Hodl costume, and this is the Orange Pill M&M. And then, Chris, I'm about to send you the winning costume was Delgado's Fuego for being the Bitcoin Wizard. If I could just find the freaking tweet. There we go. Literally being the Bitcoin Wizard that you guys have seen, not Bitcoin Gandalf, although like close second as always, my friend. But congratulations to Delgado's Fuego. Looking forward to seeing you in Miami. And of course, tickets are available now. Use promo code BMLive to get 10% off. We are going back to Miami. You are not going to want to miss this. We'll be back after this commercial break with Rafa Cordon. Chris, we didn't get
our favorite, like, anyway.
You are listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Number one Bitcoin Magazine Live. You are listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Number one Bitcoin Magazine Live. Samba.
Thank you for singing through our commercial breaks and faux pas. I'm excited to introduce our guest today is the Chief Technical Officer at IBEX Mercado. He's a lifelong Bitcoin learner, an advocate, as well as a lifelong pleb. Rafa Cordon, welcome to the show.
Hey Q, how's it going? Happy to be here.
Excited to have
Welcome.
you. Rafa, for our audience who may not be as familiar with you, do you mind giving them a little bit of background on who you are and how you got into Bitcoin in the first place?
Sure. So I'm Rafa Cordon. I'm the CTO at IBEX. IBEX is a Bitcoin payments company. We help businesses, merchants, and enterprises get onboarded onto Bitcoin. So our job is to bring Bitcoin to as many people as possible through our enterprise and business customers. How did I get into Bitcoin? I got into Bitcoin I read the white paper, the Satoshi white paper in 2011. and I read it was like too complicated, and I threw it away. A lot of people probably did the same thing.
100%.
And the second time that I saw Bitcoin and I finally paid attention it was back in 2017. I was working at a database consulting company. We did database projects, like large database implementations for telcos and financial services firms. And I was doing research on distributed databases. So I came into Bitcoin more from the technical side than sort of the philosophical perspective. I was looking at distributed databases and how this is technical stuff, but there's this thing called the CAP theorem about consistency, availability, and the ability to partition a database. And I was trying to figure out how to build a distributed database system for generating transactions. And it seemed impossible. And then I saw Bitcoin and I was like, oh my God, this is like somebody
This
has already
solves
solved
everything.
this. Yeah. It is possible to have transactions in a distributed system.
The Byzantine general's problem. Ah! I love it.
So that's how I got into Bitcoin, and I went through I have to confess that I went through my shitcoin tour of duty back in the day.
We've all been
But
there.
I finally learned that Bitcoin is the only digital money. So I joined IBEX, and I've been building cool stuff ever since.
I think we're underselling the massive success and innovation that IBEX has been part of. Can you give us some of the stats, like really pitch our audience on like why IBEX is amazing? Obviously, you guys have been involved in El Salvador. You guys have been involved with Bitcoin Amsterdam. You helped us set up Lightning-enabled systems all throughout the conference. You guys have done an incredible amount of amazing shit, specifically related to Lightning. Tell us about it. Give me some hype.
Thank you. It's been a wild ride for us. IBEX started as an OTC desk in Guatemala to help people in Guatemala buy Bitcoin. Like when I bought my first Bitcoin in Guatemala, I literally got it from a guy in the street and paid cash. So there was no formal way for people to access Bitcoin in Guatemala. So IBEX started in 2018 doing that. And when the Bitcoin law was announced back in 2021, a couple of us were in Miami, and we realized, holy shit, we need to go to El Salvador and figure out how to help Bitcoin be successful over there. So we are most of the IBEX guys are from Guatemala, and Guatemala is a 4-hour drive away from San Salvador, the capital of El Salvador. So literally 2 days later, we drove down to El Salvador and started meeting with businesses. and we were like, okay, how can we help you? With Bitcoin, do you have any plans for this? And what we first learned is that maybe the president of El Salvador knew what Bitcoin was, but the majority of Bitcoin of business owners had no idea, or they had like zero education. So the first thing we did is we filled up conference rooms in hotels in El Salvador with people, with business folks, like business owners, to help them learn and like explain Bitcoin 101. And we did like the whole thing. And that's when we realized, okay, business owners and merchants have no way of accepting Bitcoin payments. Maybe there's a wallet, like they can download a wallet, but for a large merchant, for example, Starbucks or KFC or these chains that have a bunch of restaurants, they have like a consolidated way to see transactions. They have no solution. So we realized that in order to help Bitcoin be successful in El Salvador, we needed to build something for large merchants. And that's where Ibex Pay was born, our solution for merchants. And so so we started onboarding. One of our first customers were the franchise owners of the Starbucks down there. They also had KFC, Wendy's, a bunch of fast food chains. And the El Salvador government didn't have a Lightning integration for the first iteration of the Chivo wallet, the government wallet. So we provided our Lightning API for these folks to enable Bitcoin transactions right when the Chivo wallet launched. So the government was giving out, I don't know how many dollars worth of Bitcoin for people who downloaded and installed the app. And so we were supporting that big launch with a wallet. Afterwards, we realized, wow, there's a lot of opportunity here. Businesses want to accept Bitcoin. The whole world wants to accept Bitcoin. It's not just El Salvador. And so we partnered with BTC Mag for the Miami Bitcoin conference. That's where the first time that our solution was used for a large conference. But we didn't really advertise it that much. And so now for BTC Amsterdam, we were like super ready, and like the whole conference was onboarded for Ibex Pay, like all the merchants, all the bars everywhere, even the ticket sales happened through Ibex Pay. I can't say exactly the number of transactions right now. I don't have it off the top of my mind. When we launched in El Salvador, we were processing around 10,000 transactions a day when we were supporting the government wallet in the beginning. At BTC Amsterdam, I think it was like 2,000 transactions or something like that went through Ibex Pay, but it keeps growing. Like comparing the Miami conference to the European conference, I think there was a lot more usage at Amsterdam. And that is just a testament to how Lightning is growing and knowledge about Lightning is spreading throughout all Bitcoiners. So super excited for what's to come.
There are a few different directions we can go. I want to stick on Ibex before going back to your personal journey, if we can. And
Sure.
In these sort of conferences or mini hotel gatherings that you guys would have, what were some pieces of FUD that some of these potential businesses would ask you guys about their concerns for using Bitcoin or with using Bitcoin?
The first is that they thought this was a something controlled by the government. Like they thought like the government would be able to see their transactions, and that the government they didn't know anything about Bitcoin. So they thought that maybe this was like some CBDC thing or something. They didn't use the word CBDC, but they thought it was like something that's being issued by the government, like a new type of currency. Remember, El Salvador moved from having their own organization like 15, 20 years ago. So they've been through that process already. And that was, I think, one of the first things that they were scared about, whether this was something controlled by the government. And part of the reason that they wanted to use Ibex was that they didn't want to use the government wallet, because they didn't want the government to have visibility into their business. That was the first thing. The other FUD stuff is like the typical, this is only for money laundering, or only criminals use Bitcoin, the typical sort of initial responses. But the first thing was that, these citizens, like any citizen in the world, doesn't trust the government. And so anything that is sort of pushed top down from the government. People are going to question it and are going to question the motives, whether this is another form of control, or is this something that the government wants to sort of monopolize and then own. It's like the typical story in Latin America where people involved in governments then sort of find a business. That happened throughout the telecom rollout when telcos first started and the privatization of telecommunication services. A lot of people in the government got rich by owning the frequencies for cell phone services, and so that was, I think, something that they were scared about. But when we explain Bitcoin, like this is completely open, nobody has any control over this. They started to get a more trust that what we were saying, because we were coming from outside. We were not part of the government. We had no affiliation with the government. We were just like telling our personal stories. We're Bitcoiners. We came into this because of these reasons. We want to help you be successful with Bitcoin. That was sort of what we were telling these business owners.
Got it. And are you guys still involved with the Chivo wallet? Are you guys still helping organizations get access to the Lightning Network there?
No, not the government wallet. We're not involved in that anymore. I think it wasn't the right fit working with a government. I think when the rollout happened, there were a bunch of sort of rules programmed into the application that made the user experience not that great. And so I think it was really not the right fit for us. It gave us it was an opportunity to learn for us. And it gave us, a great experience on running like a large Lightning Network operation on a scalable platform, and like a resiliency, scalability, all those things that we later incorporated into our stack. But no, we're not working with the El Salvador government anymore.
Got it. Interesting. Yeah, I know that there's been concerns or questions around sort of like how the Chivo wallet works, and basically like whether there's kind of like systems in place that truly support the best interest of the people of El Salvador. And I think that in these types of situations, my response is always like, we should be building systems that are that reflect the fact, as we like to say, that like Bitcoin is for enemies, right? We should expect that we need to have systems and incentives in place that make it economically infeasible for people that we don't have to trust to take actions that would not harm us. And I think anytime those get kind of, I don't want to say manipulated, but systems are put in place that don't support those ideals, then it becomes much more challenging to effectively use Bitcoin in the way it was ultimately designed.
And don't get me wrong, I think what El Salvador is doing is fantastic for Bitcoin. They are becoming an area for Bitcoin experimentation and testing. It happened for us, and there are a lot of other Bitcoin companies that are setting up in El Salvador and building cool stuff that you can actually test out and test in a smaller market to see if it's a product that you can take to the world. So I think it was a great decision on part of the government to adopt Bitcoin. I'm definitely not against it. I'm just saying that's what business people were thinking. But for me, I think what El Salvador did is amazing, and I hope politicians in Guatemala, because we're neighbors, they take note of what's happening down there, and we can do something similar very soon.
Interesting. What do you think? Go ahead.
Just, I don't mean to sound like an asshole, but I'm just going to ask it in a very direct way. But we're obviously in a very deep bear market in Bitcoin winter. Have some of the merchants that you guys onboarded, or just some of the people you guys have had conversations with, like just sort of been turned off by the price of Bitcoin, or have they still actually stayed, and have you guys been able to continue to grow despite the price?
Well, in El Salvador, we offer conversion. So merchants, that's another problem that we solve for merchants. First, they needed a platform, and then they needed a way to convert payments to dollars. So several of the merchants use our conversion service. We have literally like a little slider within IBEX Pay that you can set what percentage you want to keep in Bitcoin and what percentage you want to keep in local currency. I don't think they've been turned off at all. The merchants continue accepting Bitcoin payments. The whole Bitcoin project in El Salvador has attracted a lot of tourism and new people that want to spend Bitcoin. And so merchants are accepting Bitcoin payments. Some merchants keep the Bitcoin and some merchants convert the fiat. It's I think it would be like around 50-50. Some people convert and some people keep the Bitcoin. But at the end of the day, Bitcoin should be it should be transparent, right? There's like people shouldn't even know what kind of if they're receiving Bitcoin or not. The system just works. Like it works so well that you don't have to think about what's going on in the background. Just like sending an email, you don't know all the protocols or how it's working necessarily. It just works. And so I don't think merchants have been turned off at all. I think given like the conversations that we have with merchants, they're very excited. And some of these merchants, they have locations in other countries outside of El Salvador, and they want to roll out the payment solution to other countries.
So I want to talk a little bit just on the topic of Bitcoin being a medium of exchange. For a lot of people, especially like myself included, it really is a store of value. I get so upset when I have to spend my Bitcoin right now. I will go out of my way to go buy more Bitcoin to spend that rather than having to spend anything that I have already sort of bought, held, and put in cold storage. And I'm curious how you and the team at IBEX are trying to get people to think about Bitcoin at that next stage of money being that medium of exchange.
A large, a big thing here is remittances. I can speak for Guatemala. I think 15% of the Guatemala GDP is remittances only. So
Can you
50%
define
of
that
the-
term just for our audience? When you say remittances, what do you mean?
Remittances is money that is being sent from people abroad. So there's a lot of immigration from Guatemalans and El Salvador. I think El Salvador even bigger than Guatemala. A lot of immigration to the United States. And so Guatemalans living in the United States, or Salvadorians living in the United States, they send money back to their family members. That's a remittance. And so Guatemala's economy, the GDP, how it's measured in the GDP, around 15% of the whole economy of Guatemala, and I would say like 20-25% in El Salvador, is based on remittances. So money coming in from expats into the country. And literally 25%, a third of that money that comes in is taken by as commissions or fees by all the different like actors within like the money supply chain when the money comes into our countries. So Bitcoin improves this in order of magnitude. And if people are receiving their remittances or receiving money from relatives in Bitcoin, it's easier to spend it in Bitcoin than to think of it as a store of value. Many of the people that receive remittances are, so another interesting fact is in Guatemala, 40% of people are unbanked. So 4 out of 10 don't have a bank account. And so they're not thinking about saving a large sums of money. Most of the money that comes in remittances is spent on daily consumption. And so spending the Bitcoin as just money to spend on daily consumption is a common thing. I think many people that see Bitcoin as a store of value probably come from other places where these are not the typical problems, right? There's not remittances, or remittances are not a big thing. I was fortunate not to have to be in that situation, but people who are receiving remittances for like daily consumption items, it's they're willing to spend it. And an interesting thing that came up when we did the initial El Salvador rollout is that we did like a histogram to see like what was the distribution of transaction sizes. Like, and I would say, I think like 60% of transactions in Bitcoin were between $2 to $4 worth of Bitcoin. So people were using it for micro payments.
it's always interesting to see and have these conversations around the present day use cases for Bitcoins, because there is a level of privilege that especially Americans get to have in regards to money. And then you turn around and you leave America and you start to really see how and why they need money in real time. Um, in these interactions or in your own personal experience, are there things you would like to see further developed or offered for people to be able to use their Bitcoin?
I think financial institutions getting onboarded onto Bitcoin, like large, and that's big part of our like sales, like our commercial effort is not to onboard like individuals or like small merchants, but to onboard these big companies that have millions of users on their app, and just adding Bitcoin into an app like these. Like there's this tendency right now of this thing called super apps. Super apps, this app that does everything, like WeChat in China, Kakao in Korea. There's several like super apps coming up in different countries. And so our focus is helping these super app companies integrate Bitcoin within their apps. And like that's one single effort that you need to do to provide exposure to Bitcoin for like 5 million, 10 million people in one shot. And so that's what we're focusing on. And I think more financial institutions are getting more comfortable with Bitcoin every day, especially in here in Guatemala. We're next to El Salvador. A lot of institutions are asking about it, and so that's, I think, what needs to happen from a regulatory standpoint. Definitely, there is no legal definition for Bitcoin in a lot of countries. I think only El Salvador is the country that has like a law that says what Bitcoin is in a certain way. Like it needs more details, but there's like a legal definition of what Bitcoin is. I think we need to define what Bitcoin is from a legal standpoint, not necessarily like laws passed by Congress, but things like jurisprudence, like having a history of interpretations of what Bitcoin is, and then there's like a general idea from a legal point of view of what Bitcoin is. I think that needs to happen in these countries for more financial institutions to get comfortable with it. But at the end of the day, it's about the people, like how people are going to see Bitcoin, how they're going to use it. We're doing some user research with people who cash out remittances, and it's been interesting on how you need to change a mindset. And I think all of us Bitcoiners, we changed that mindset. It took us a long time, but we changed that mindset. And so how can we change the mindset for millions of people in one shot? For example, we created like a mock Bitcoin wallet, and we were showing it to people who currently cash out remittances. They received remittances and converted it to cash. And one of the first things that came up is that the first pieces of feedback was like, hey, I don't have to create an account here. Like I don't have to put in my email and password. And that was surprising. They were like, oh, like I'm not sure I'm going to use it because I don't trust it. Because they're used to creating an account, just like a bank account, like a Facebook
Oh,
account.
wow. That's so interesting. Wait, so just
Yeah,
repeat that.
that was surprising.
People were, I want to make sure I understood what you're saying. You're saying that because people are so used to being KYC'd, which I view as like a crime, the fact that if somebody wants to engage with financial services, they must fully dox themselves to whatever services they're using. You're saying that because your users didn't have to do that, they were like, I don't know if I can trust this financial app.
Exactly.
Wow. Man, that is fucked up.
It's that's what I'm talking about, like changing a mental model of, because these people, a lot of people who receive remittances probably didn't get like a high school education or college or anything, and so they're used to creating an account. Most of them have a Facebook account or a Twitter account, and so any new service that I'm going to use, I need to create an account for. That's like, I think, like the logical sort of reasoning. And when you say, hey, you can just use it, receive Bitcoin, you don't have to create an account, they're like, wait a minute, what is this? That was an interesting thing. So we're thinking about how we can sort of educate the user to sort of break those paradigms that sort of Bitcoin enables, right? And so those are the things. It's more things that have to change, sort of in people's psyche or mentality, or the way that they've been used to consume, internet-based services, into how Bitcoin works. Yeah.
I want to interrupt this for just a quick second because the FOMC minutes came out, and again, we live in the moment in time where I guess everyone is now a Fed expert and interest rate expert. Confirmed another 75 basis point rate hike. Rafa, like, what are your thoughts? You discovered and rediscovered Bitcoin in 2017. Especially since 2020, it feels like every single Bitcoiner on Bitcoin Twitter has become this like Federal Reserve interest rate sort of expert connoisseur. Like, do you care? Do you bother yourself with the nuances of what goes on with the dollar?
More and more each time, and I wouldn't say it's just Bitcoiners who become sort of federal, like Fed experts. I was talking to a guy yesterday who flips homes, and he was talking to the broker about changing, giving a discount on a home, because he didn't know what the Fed, if the Fed came out with this hike that just was announced. He was like, okay, give a special offer right before the Fed comes out, because if the Fed comes out, people are going to be able to have less ability to borrow. This is a guy who flips homes, not a Bitcoiner. I was explaining Bitcoin to him. So more and more, every participant in the economy is paying attention to this. And we shouldn't have to. Like, these are people who are playing, unelected officials were playing around with our money. And now every person, regardless if they're Bitcoiners or not, they're paying attention to what the Fed says. It's ridiculous, I think.
I know, how fucked up is it that you can't just produce value, earn money for that value, and then put it somewhere and keep it. Everybody has to be like an investment expert, or delegate their expertise or their money to somebody else who is an expert, in order to just maintain the value that you have earned fairly over time. It's infuriating.
Totally agree.
So
I want to also actually ask this because you bring up how, we're starting to see it creep into normie land. You see a real estate developer talking about this, but we also were talking about how a country like El Salvador, they are a dollarized nation, and they will feel the effects of things like an increase in our interest rates even more drastically than the next person who wants to buy their second or third vacation home just to Airbnb it out to the next person. I'm curious though, if people in these other jurisdictions that are stuck using the dollar, if they even bother themselves, or if they have the time, the bandwidth to do it, or if they just sort of have to, I need to make money to send home. I need to make money and sort of live and survive.
Ecuador is another example of a dollarized economy, and Ecuador is even bigger than El Salvador. I think this impacts these countries even more than like Americans, for example, regarding the Fed. Because there was no stimmy check for Salvadorians, right? They only got the inflation, but they didn't get the stimulus check, right? And they're using dollars, but the stimulus check only goes to people in the United States. But the Salvadorians who use the dollar, they don't get the benefits. Like all these policy decisions, they only get the bad part, I feel. And so I don't know, like at the micro economy level, if people who are sending remittances are looking at, I wouldn't be able to answer that question, to see if these people are looking at what the Fed is doing, but it definitely impacts them. We've seen prices going up in all of these countries, and especially in dollarized countries, prices have gone up. El Salvador, Guatemala's not dollarized, but we like this is affecting everyone. And I think long term, something has to change. I think more and more countries like El Salvador, I think Ecuador could be another good candidate because of what the government did with the switch to the dollar. These countries are going to be the first ones to adopt Bitcoin. Argentina is another example. In Argentina, instead of being a top down thing, it's a bottom up thing. A lot of these, so there's two big wallets, like digital wallet in Argentina. One is Lemon Cash, and the other one is called Belo. They already support Lightning. I know Belo already supports Lightning, and so people are starting to use Bitcoin in Argentina, but it's more of a grassroots thing than a government push. So I think it's gonna slowly, but it's gonna happen. It's definitely gonna happen here.
So I want to shift this back to Bitcoin because ultimately, and I'll just leave it at this. Once again, the market decided how much they wanted the rate hikes to be, and the Federal Reserve just did what the market is, almost like we're overpaying 12 white people to make decisions that the market itself will just make for itself.
Wait,
I'm
you're
not
saying
saying-
the Fed? You're saying the Fed does not actually control the direction of the market?
No, they do only so far as they think they do. It's
So
like
I was making the joke that they don't control shit. They basically are a reactive agency, even though they present themselves as a proactive agency.
you are one of. I think the metaphor I'm trying to present is like, that kid that you're babysitting. You got to make him feel special and important, but in reality, like you're doing your own thing. You're off, whatever. Teacher gives this one kid something to keep themselves busy. That kid thinks he's super important, special, turns in a report. Everyone's like, yeah, cool, great job. Meanwhile, the rest of the class worked on like the actual project that was supposed to be taken care of and done. That's what the market and the Fed. The Fed is the little kid that you just got to keep busy.
The illusion of choice. Yeah, I think.
Absolutely. Rafa, I'd love just if you can share in your opinion, why do you think Bitcoin is a superior form of money, specifically as it relates to a medium of exchange?
It's a bare asset, instant settlement, extremely low fees. It's a digital native currency. I think so. So Guatemala has there's 11 cell phones for every 10 persons.
Wow.
Yeah. There are a lot of places in Guatemala where there's no electricity, but you can get cell phone signal.
Oh, that's amazing. That is an amazing stat.
Yeah. And so, why do I think Bitcoin is the best medium of exchange? Because it's the best money anybody can have. I think, and a lot of these, like 40% of unbanked people, it's not that the banks are evil and they don't want to, provide services for 40% of the people. It's just not profitable for the banks because the bank is a money making machine, and so a person is maybe doesn't have enough savings that it's not. Cost wise, it doesn't make sense. It's not economically feasible for the bank to provide services for 40% of the population. And so providing providing access to digital money should not be a profit making business, I feel, right? It's a commodity. It's a digital commodity that anybody should have access to. And so that's why I feel like in my sort of latitudes, that's the struggle that I see people having. For example, workers, I talk to people who have farms. The workers, they take their phone to work only because they can charge it at work, because back home they don't have electricity. So they go to work in the farm, they charge the phone in the farm, and then they take it home and use up the battery during the rest of the night, and then go back to work again and charge it again. And so how can we provide financial services for these people? How can these people get access to digital money? The only way I feel is through Bitcoin.
So what are some of the technical challenges, as the CTO of IBEX? And by the way, is it IBEX or EBEX?
Depends on what language you're speaking.
Whichever.
IBEX in English.
Okay.
What are some
There's a running joke, just so you know, Rafa, that P pronounces every single business and name incorrectly on this show.
I'd say it's not everyone. We're talking
literally
like,
everyone.
It's like at least it's no more than 90%. So get your facts straight, Q. But I'm curious, what are some of the technical challenges that you guys face specifically as it relates to Lightning? Like, what are some of the, what are the biggest hurdles that in your position you have to overcome?
Um, I Lightning works incredibly well. Um, I don't have any like complaints about Lightning or anything that I'm saying. Oh, Lightning is struggling with this. Whenever we use Lightning, it works perfectly. There are some small things. For example, invoices have too many characters. So for implementing being able to send money with feature phones instead of smartphones, there's a protocol called USSD for sending. That's the protocol that, for example, M-Pesa uses in Africa for sending money through phones. The invoice is too long, and so it doesn't fit inside the protocol. So a workaround is using Lightning addresses, which are much smaller. So you can encode a Lightning addresses within a text message, and it doesn't fill up the whole text space. But those are like small challenges. I think Lightning, it's incredible. I think there's on the non-custodial side, I think there's a lot of development that can help bring non-custodial Lightning services to more people. Right now, going non-custodial requires either significant technical skills or it's a pretty bad user experience. Because if you're running, for example, a like a small Lightning node on your phone, for example, like Breeze has been doing recently, every time you open the app, it needs to resync the Lightning node. And so, if somebody's gonna, for example, in our case where people pay in Bitcoin, when somebody says, "Oh, can I pay in Bitcoin?" and they pull out their Bitcoin wallet, and the merchant has pulls out the wallet and then has to wait for an hour for the Lightning node to sync on the phone. It's not a great experience. That's why. But so I think, but there are people are working on that. I've talked to some people who are doing non-custodial service, but the node sits somewhere else and only it spins up on demand. Those types of things I think are being worked on by some really smart people. So on the non-custodial side, I think the work that needs to get done is user experience for non-custodial Lightning services. I think there's a lot of improvement that can happen there to bring that to more people. But in terms of the Lightning Network throughput, I think it's working great. It's working even better every time. We were seeing a higher percentage of failed payments last year compared to this year. And that just speaks to the Lightning Network's resiliency and how much it's growing, how many nodes, channels, different paths that payments can take there are. So that I think is the Lightning Network is bootstrapping itself super quickly. It's just the last mile thing, how the user interacts with the service, I think needs some work for the non-custodial side.
Yeah, I think that is the current frontier, is how do you basically allow people to have full custody of their Lightning wallet while they're using a mobile device. In terms of not being able to be fully connected to the network at all times. As you said, people having to charge their phones at work and then use it at home. It is an interesting challenge. There's definitely work being done there.
Yeah, Blockstream is working on something called Greenlight, where the node where the node is like a virtual node that spins up on the fly whenever you're doing a payment, and there's some central node that connects to just to sync up the copy of the Lightning of the graph. There's a lot of stuff that's happening there. It'll be a mix between connecting to a server elsewhere in the cloud or some other service provider like LSP. That's the new sort of term. And
it's the Lightning service provider. Yeah. Interesting. So what? Go ahead, Gil.
No, go ahead. Keep going.
I was gonna say what specific areas in the Lightning technology space are you most excited about right now? What are you, for me personally, I'm really excited about, Fetty and the work that Obinwasu and, Eric and all those guys are doing. But I'm curious, what gets you the most fired up when you're thinking about the new developments that are happening in the Lightning Network?
what I said, user experience. User experience. Our mission at IBEX is to help bring Bitcoin to as many. Our mission is to make Bitcoin easy for companies, easy for individuals. And so, how can we make Bitcoin easy for these billions of people who are not Bitcoiners, right? That's sort of what I'm excited about. So this green light project is something that I'm very excited about. We are starting to do some testing, and it's sort of like within the spectrum of custodial and non-custodial. What pieces can you keep on the mobile device, and what other pieces of the sort of Lightning node or Lightning protocol implementation you can keep in a separate node. And so that is really what excites me more, because that is what's going to bring Bitcoin to billions of people. Yeah, more the user experience thing. At least what we do at IBEX, we're not like a Lightning engineering company. We're more of helping. Our job is more to help companies and people use Bitcoin. So that user experience part, I think, is going to be the key to making Bitcoin easy for non-Bitcoiners.
I want to just also go back a little bit, Rafa, and ask maybe a stupid question, but I'm not the technical person. P is. When you bring up how there were a lot of failed payments last year, more so than you guys are seeing this year, what were some of the things your team was concluding caused those failed payments?
The nodes, I think there were no, because a Lightning payment like jumps through several, makes several jumps through a path, and something in the path wouldn't work. Like a node was down, or a channel didn't have enough liquidity, things like that. I think there's more liquidity pouring in to the Lightning network, and just having more liquidity enables more successful payments. There was, I think, there last year there was much. I don't know exactly what the growth in liquidity has been for the Lightning network between 2021 and 2022, but it must be something significant, because the more liquidity there is in the Lightning network, and distributed across channels, the easier it is to have successful payments. There are multiple paths that a payment can take. It's easier for payments to get confirmed. So I think that was the main cause. There are companies that are specializing in having these very well connected nodes with a bunch of liquidity. I know that's sort of like a centralized spot, but this enables like super fast payments. And the cool thing is, these companies, they cannot monopolize this. Like anybody can set it up. But yeah, I think liquidity is sort of what's happening.
So I totally lost my train of thought there. I had the question, and then it was just like, nah, you're not going to get this question out of your mouth. P, back to you.
I guess I'm just my bent is always towards the more.
Oh no, I remember it. Stop talking, P. Okay, we saw yesterday the news about this hack that happened within the Lightning Network. A lot of people up in arms about it, upset.
Wait, hold on. It was not a hack. Let's be very clear. This was an issue. Okay, so this is an issue that Barack, who I don't know, several weeks back, contributed or made a transaction that BTCD, which is used by LND, which is one of the more popular Lightning protocol implementations, submitted a transaction, and it essentially broke LND. So that required a hotfix, which was pushed out very quickly. Then yesterday, there was another transaction that he created, which did not have the same level of disruption to the network, but also affected LND. And there's been interesting controversy, because some people are saying like, hey man, like why are you sort of black hat style submitting these transactions which negatively affect the Lightning network? The argument is, oh, you're creating FUD around the Lightning network. And then the other side of it is, well, Bitcoin is for enemies. Bitcoin is an adversarial environment. So if you're seeing these issues, you absolutely are entitled to call them out and to create transactions that are going to, cause this level of controversy so that they get fixed as rapidly as possible. So that's what was going on. It's definitely not a hack. No funds were lost. In fact, on the most recent one, end users would not have even noticed. But there was a sort of negative press for Lightning Labs, and because they're the ones that produce LND. So that's what we're talking about. But Q, please continue.
No. I mean, all of what P said, Rafa, I'd love your thoughts on whether this was an appropriate thing that happened. Is this a necessary thing? Would you have done things differently or the same?
I know some of the Lightning Labs folks, so I probably would have taken a different approach. But as P said, it's Lightning is should be like Bitcoin should be resilient, and anybody should be able to attack it. And I think I would definitely have done it in a different manner, but it is what it is. Like with great power comes great responsibility, man. We need like if you want to custody your own money, you should be responsible for making sure you have the latest update of the software, right? Um, we stand on the shoulders of giants. All the people who have contributed to Bitcoin, all the companies who are working on the Lightning protocol. And so that's how I see it. And so I wouldn't try to attack it because I respect everyone's work, and I think I want to push the I don't want to create FUD, but the whole point of Bitcoin is to protect you from adversaries and enemies. So I think we are like super connected to all the different channels of communication for all the different software components that we use in our stack, and we're always checking that everything is up to date. But yeah, it is what it is. I have nothing else to say about that.
Fair. P, unless there was anything else you wanted to talk Lightning in particular, or IBEX, I wanted to switch it now back to just Rafa, because at the beginning of the conversation, Rafa, you brought up two things that I think most, if not all, Bitcoiners kind of go through. The two things being, the first time you heard about Bitcoin, you literally ignored it. I myself did the exact same thing. In fact, when I attempted to send myself things in college and found out that I had to use Bitcoin as the payment, I was like, what is this? Nah, that's the hurdle that I don't want to deal with. So no. And it took me until 2017 as well. I'd love it if you could just share advice for those people who maybe are just now coming back to Bitcoin or have been turned off by Bitcoin, of different ways they can try to reapproach.
I learned an expensive lesson, I think, at that point. Um, Always give everything a chance. I think give everything a chance to learn. Like that. I think I learned to always hear everyone, be more aware of my surroundings and not be as certain of I know what's right and what's wrong, and I have be more aware of my ignorance, and more open to the lessons and things out in the world that I can learn. I think that's what Bitcoin taught me. What can I tell people who've been sort of turned off by Bitcoin? The thing is, when I finally understood Bitcoin, I haven't been turned off by Bitcoin. But I fell down the rabbit hole, and there's no way I'm coming back. I even I had to find a job in Bitcoin because there was no way of getting rid of this virus. I think so. This is probably not the best thing to say, but Bitcoin is like a religion, and so every Bitcoiner that you meet sort of agrees on certain principles, of what's right and what's wrong, like certain like moral principles. And I think anybody who's sort of been turned off by Bitcoin should sort of look at those principles of Bitcoin, like not your keys, not your wallet, uh, uh, don't verify, don't trust, all these sort of main tenets of Bitcoin. Um, they make sense to everyone. It makes sense to every person who listens to this. It's obvious that it makes sense, right? And so I think anybody who sort of been turned off by Bitcoin should read about those things. And I try not to read, so I don't read like a lot of Bitcoin philosophical sort of books or all these books that come out. I stick to the core principles, and that's sort of what I believe in. And if anything changes in the way that Bitcoin works that doesn't match my beliefs, then I don't know. I'll find something else to do. But I don't know. I think there are these certain core principles in Bitcoin that there's this common ground that all Bitcoiners can sort of agree on, and people need to revisit those common tenets.
So I don't agree with that, quite frankly, Rafa.
Oh, really?
I will say, like, there's a degree where I do agree, and that is, there are fundamental core values that most Bitcoiners should have based on what Bitcoin offers. But we're entering this iteration where, and we talk very openly about this on the show, like Bitcoin is not meant just for people who have a certain viewpoint or vantage point about the world, or think this should be done by the government or should not be done by the government. Bitcoin is genuinely meant for everyone, and all ideas to be absorbed by it. That said, of course, there are certain things like, being a freedom oriented person versus being a more state oriented person. Like, one of those types of people is more likely to find and discover and really understand Bitcoin. But I frankly think, and I find, especially, Bitcoin Twitter being what it is, like, there's a lot of hypocrisy there. There's a lot of hypocrisy of like, I want my ideas to go through, and I believe in Bitcoin, so therefore this idea is right and just, and your idea is just flat out wrong. And I think that divisiveness is incorrect and not actually a true tenet and value of Bitcoin. There's this, we're 6 days away from an election, so I'll make it political a little bit. We're starting to see Bitcoin turn into this, like, oh, well, Republicans and far right extremists like Bitcoin, so therefore I'm a Democrat or I'm a liberal, so therefore I must not like Bitcoin. And that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. The ideas and conversation around energy blow my mind because they're rooted in a lack of understanding of just how and why energy usage is valuable for humanity and society. But the thing that I find really weird, and like we talked about this at the very beginning of this episode, there was a conversation going on around Bitcoin Twitter around, oh, Iran looks like it's going to start bombing Saudi Arabia. And, the question I keep posing to everyone is like, why is this the media narrative Bitcoiners want to buy into and believe? And it's because it feeds into these biases that we already sort of have. Another example that, I didn't ever say this publicly, this will probably cancel me for good from Bitcoin Twitter. But the reaction to the Roe v. Wade decision, I felt was very anti-Bitcoin. And what I mean by that is, you had a class of citizens lose freedom and rights that were then turned around and given to the state. And you had these anti-statist, freedom-oriented Bitcoiners applauding the decision, not because it was true to the value of freedom, but because it was true to what they themselves wanted to see. And I felt like we are starting to see this divisiveness more and more. And I challenge and urge people, instead of saying, you have to be this freedom-oriented max, it's like, no, you could have, there are infinite reasons why someone should adopt Bitcoin. but there is only going to be one reason for each individual. And the reason you may choose to adopt Bitcoin for yourself and the reason I choose to adopt Bitcoin can be two frankly opposite reasons. They could be. And I think there is a divisiveness that is growing that is frankly dangerous to the potential for hyper Bitcoinization.
Yeah, I saw a meme come out where it has like Bitcoiner starter pack and like a cross and like a Bible. What the-
Exactly. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not like I'm spiritual. I'm absolutely spiritual, but like I don't have a cross in this house. Like I'm a Brad family from the Middle East. Like there's no cross in this house. But there has become this divisiveness of like you have to have these qualities. You have to be this type of person. It's like, no, you just literally have to be a human being. Like my dog's not going to interact with Bitcoin unless we figure that out. But beyond that, Bitcoin is for everyone.
Yeah, when I said that like core principles in Bitcoin or core, values in Bitcoin, I mean more things like keep the state out of money, things like that. Every Bitcoiner is going to agree on that, whether they're far right Bitcoin or leftist Bitcoin. That's sort of something that we can all agree on, right? Um, and so those are the basic principles that I feel that Bitcoin should have. The whole thing on Bitcoin Twitter, like where those narratives are taken, I think narratives can be manipulated, and I don't know like what the purpose of that is. I don't really keep up too much with what's going on in Twitter because everybody's entitled to their opinion, and there's like a lot of narratives that are coming in and out that are distracting. Right, I'm focused on building, and that's what like I'm passionate about. Um, I don't know. I think these sort of narratives that happen, I think people need. The other thing about humans is we need to be entertained, right? We need to be have a distraction, have something that entertains us. We need to gossip. Those things are just moving into the digital world now, but it's still happening. And so I don't really think it's that powerful. Maybe we should get the CEO of Bitcoin to come out and make a statement.
My volume cut out literally as you said that. I'm so sorry. Do you mind repeating yourself?
No, I'm just making a joke. I'm making a bad joke about the CEO of Bitcoin coming out and making a statement.
Oh, yes. Yes, of course. Or just asking him to just change, the price of Bitcoin or reissue the Bitcoin that I lost all those years ago.
Yeah.
But I'm curious if you feel like the divisive narrative that has been growing is helpful or harmful to the growth of Bitcoin. And by growth, I more mean adoption.
I don't think it's relevant. I think adoption, when we're talking about billions of people who are unbanked, the narratives on Twitter really are not something that's gonna matter to people. It's as I said, it's something to entertain us who Bitcoiners who are on Bitcoin Twitter. It's entertaining, it's gossip, it's stuff, but it's entertainment at the end of the day. I think it's if you think of it in the long term, I don't think it's gonna really. Bitcoin is unstoppable. Bitcoin is just it's unstoppable. There's no way any government's gonna be able to stop it. And so every bull run, millions of new Bitcoiners are born, or millions of new people get exposed to Bitcoin. So every bull run is this big adoption thing, and then it stabilizes. And then another bull run until the whole world is going to know about Bitcoin. On the like user research that we were doing, we were with people who receive remittances. We interviewed a couple of people who were like around 40, 47. They didn't know what Bitcoin but we interviewed a couple of 20-something-year-olds that were cashing out remittances. They knew about Bitcoin. They already knew about Bitcoin, these people. And so that is new compared to like 2 years ago. And that's going to continue happening. I just want to be around to see it. But it's some I feel it's unstoppable. So people will have opinions. I think that's great that people have different opinions. I'm happy that people are free to express their opinions and speak their minds. I think that is, for at least for me, an important thing of living in a free society. Um, and I would never want to like feel that a narrative has to be controlled or anything. People should just be able to say whatever they want to say. And Bitcoin's gonna keep churning along.
No,
Bitcoin is not gonna stop.
I also very much appreciate, and I'm gonna take the liberty of changing your words, but it almost feels like, these narratives that we're discussing, it's a privilege to be in a position to discuss those versus being in a situation where you are unbanked and you have no choice, and this is a life raft to save you from the situation that you find yourself in.
Yeah, that's a way of putting it. And we are all passionate about Bitcoin. We're always gonna be looking for anything that anybody says about Bitcoin. We want to read it, right? That's just how it is. But Bitcoin is the most reliable computer ever made. No
So,
other computer in the world has run for as long as Bitcoin without ever stopping.
and I think that's an important note. Like there was, I think, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a long block wait time over the weekend as well. And then last weekend, there was also like an almost, I think it was 85 minutes. Yeah. Of a block time. And like crypto people were like, oh, look, Bitcoin stopped, but like it didn't stop. It continues to go. And I'd love if you can just you don't need to, nor do I want you to discuss what shitcoins you went down the path of, but can you just share for some of our audience members who may be lost, who may be in the weeds of shitcoins, what first drew you away from Bitcoin? And then what was it that brought you back to say like, yo, this is all just stupid. Bitcoin is the only real valuable digital currency.
I think how easy it is for programmers was what brought me to other places. Like building stuff on other crypto platforms was easier than building on Bitcoin. And that's what sort of made me interested in exploring other areas. But there is so much irresponsibility and bullshit in those spaces that there was a point where I couldn't like keep up anymore with like what was going on. Like, um, and I felt morally irresponsible to continue down that path instead of building something for the future and something that I'm going to look back on and feel proud of myself of having contributed to humanity and to advancement of human society. And that's why I want to work in Bitcoin. That's what keeps me here. Is that I'm proud of what I do, and I didn't feel proud of of working in other areas. Bitcoin is a solid platform. It's something that, yeah, I think it comes down to that, being proud of the work that I do.
As everyone should be. So P, has Rafa convinced you to stop shitcoining?
I haven't shitcoined since 1978.
Also, Rafa, did you know, how old do you think P is?
Oh
Genuine
my
question.
God, this old chestnut. We have beaten this horse to death and sent it to
You
the
say
Gene
that.
Factory.
You say that. And yet I still get laughs.
35.
If you add a 1 to the beginning of that
Very close,
number,
very close.
100.
I'm the oldest person on the stream, so the joke is that I am a Highlander, which of course I am, and I've been around forever.
He continues to freeze his body and then defrost it to
That's true.
re-enter society and civilization. He has seen a lot of things.
How
He's
Finney
an
style.
encyclopedia of knowledge.
The reason that the show is always from the shoulders up is because below this is a cyborg body. Nobody has seen me in person in years. I want to ask a totally different question. One of the things that I read a lot of science fiction, And I feel like a lot of fiction inspires a lot of the positive changes that we see in society. And I'm curious what fiction, we talk a lot about things like the mandibles, which is not science fiction, it's more like science fact. But I'm curious if there's anything that is outside of Bitcoin that you focus your energy on that impacts how you think about Bitcoin and what those things might be.
Meditation, I think, self-knowledge, stoicism. As I said, when I like first looked at Bitcoin, I just threw it away. I read the white paper and I didn't like think about it. I need to be more open and aware of my surroundings. I think practicing that, the ability of being, I don't know what the word is, maybe mindful, I don't know, but being more open to listening to new things. I think it's a process of being a more mature person as you get older, of not never discarding anything just because it doesn't fit my current frame of mind. And so people are I think, I don't know, I think outside I don't really do a lot of stuff outside of Bitcoin and my family. That's pretty much all I do. But meditation and practicing the ability to remove yourself from drop your ego, and you drop your preconceptions and mental things that sort of block you from seeing the world as it is. I think those are practicing that is something that's very, very powerful. And I think a lot of people are doing it more and more. Some people may do it through meditation, others through like psychedelics, but there's different ways of sort of removing your ego or the mental sort of blockers that you may have, and being more open to new things, and to listening about to looking at the truth of the world. I think society is more and more moving towards that. Not everyone, like a lot of people, there's a lot of like distractions in social media and things like that pull pull people away from focusing on themselves. But I think that is like one thing that's gonna help us, or change the way that society works in the future. Being more mindful of those things is not just a technological thing. It's an evolution towards like more self-awareness, that is quickly changing your perception of things. For example, Bitcoin, right? How many paradigms did I have to break in order to understand Bitcoin, right? I looked at Bitcoin from the technical side. I was like, this is cool. But then on the sort of philosophical thing, on the philosophical perspective of, what is money? How does money work? What is value? I had to go through down that rabbit hole of Nick Szabo's blog posts. I don't know if you read Nick Szabo. His all his research and stuff is incredible. And so I went down that rabbit hole, and it helped me understand that there's more to the world. There's more to money than what meets the eye. I think that's sort of what we're sort of evolving towards, in a certain way. What do you think? I'd love to hear what you think.
Hugh, I'm going to let you take this one first.
Just probably about the mentality, or specifically what?
Rafa, you want to rearticulate the question so Q can.
Yeah. So I think your question, P, was what advances or new changes in like science fiction do you think are affecting the way society behaves? I think that was the question.
Just the idea of the metaverse. I think it's like making us dumber. Like candidly, it's this idea of, like let's do this. Let's focus all of our energy over here, when in fact we have so many broken systems in place, And we are, rather than trying to fix the money, we're more worried about let's get a bunch of digital art set up in a digital environment because that is where the future of our society will live. Man, I'm still waiting for my flying car and hoverboard and self-tying Nikes. All right. Robert Zemeckis promised me these things very, very, using two varies was the wrong approach there, but I was promised these things by Back to the Future and I've yet to receive them. And I think society would be a lot better if like we just abandoned all of these things and focus more on, easier travel. Right now, the fact that the best we could do for travel around the world is an airplane, which is truly an incredible phenomenon, but there's no added innovation. We're not trying to expand on that. We're not trying to improve on that. You have the metaverse taking up so much time. In fact, one of the largest businesses in the world shifted their entire business model to focus on this, and it just bleeds their business money now. And there's a class of people who genuinely think this is the future. We've seen, what was it, Google Glass try to enter the VR world. We saw Microsoft with their VR headset. We have Meta now with their VR headsets. You have this push towards virtual reality while we then choose to forget how to live in real reality. What does that lead into? P, that leads into your bug protein, that leads into 3D printed meat, that leads into this idea that we don't need things from the real world anymore. And I think that is a very dangerous path to go down. But that said, we don't need real world money. We need digital money.
One thing that surprised me recently was my son. He told me, Dad, I built you, my 7-year-old son, he told me, Dad, I built you a house on Minecraft. And so he showed me this. It's got like a staircase and a pool or whatever. He was showing it to me, and he was pulling lava from some other thing, and he dropped lava in the house, and so the house caught fire and burned down. And he was crying. He spent all day. He was like super depressed and super sad that his virtual house had burned down. And I was like, holy shit, this is another world that I have no idea. Like this is a completely, like, my son was emotionally affected in a way that I had never seen him be. Like, even if his Legos, his like physical Legos, broke, he wouldn't freak out. Like, he freaked out about his virtual house burning down. And this is a 7-year-old kid who, this is his world. I realized, holy shit, this is his world, and a world that I have never seen. And so I'm not sure how to think about it yet. Like, what's going on there? Is this just another distraction, or is this something of value? Because it was to him, it was something of value that he had created that was destroyed. And so I don't know how to if we extrapolate some of that behavior 10 years, 20 years, when my son is like 25, 27 years old, what's going to happen? What is that going to look like? Right?
I just love imagining you sitting your son down and he's crying. He's really upset about this Minecraft fire that destroyed his entire house. And you just being like, just remember, the government hates you and you need to buy Bitcoin. Just no explanation, just that, really just hammering it home, warping his young, fragile mind. My dad was a numismatist, was a precious metals trader for his professional life. And that was just like a constant, like, repeated refrain in my household. Like, Bitcoin obviously didn't exist when I was, a young child, but it's like the government is trying to inflate away your value. Trust no one. And,
Wow.
Hard money is the only money.
I don't know what's going to happen, man. It's a scary thing.
Rafa, let me ask you this, because neither P nor I have children that we know of. But like, as you see just where the world is today, as we prepare, hopefully, to give our children a better world, do you feel like we are on that right path, or what would you like to see changed? I'm giving you the magic wand. You are king of the world. What are you changing?
I have no idea what I would change, man. What I see is that younger generations, they just believe in Bitcoin from the start. They don't have any of those paradigms that we had to break in order to understand Bitcoin. At least that I had to break in order to understand what was the value of Bitcoin. Kids right now, they know that Bitcoin is the future. Like one of my son's friends, another 7-year-old kid, he told me, "Yeah, Bitcoin's the future." This kid, right? This kid, for them, it's natural. That's how it's going to happen. Because I remember that this video that goes around sometimes of these news reporters trying to analyze what an email address was. Like, what is this A with a squiggly line around it? Like, what does at mean? And this was back in the 90s. Like, email was just coming out, and like, what does at mean when you say, Rafa at ibexmercado.com? What does at mean? What is this squiggly thing? I think younger generations, they don't come with all that baggage that we had to grow up in a fiat system with, right? And so that's why I'm very bullish on Bitcoin, because for younger generations, this is going to be like super simple. I lived through the internet, the adoption of internet when I was a little kid, right? I had first I had like my physical encyclopedia books, then like Microsoft Encarta, a CD where you had the encyclopedia inside the CD, and I went through the sort of phase to Googling, and online and everything. And so for me, it was natural to use the internet compared to like my dad, for whom it wasn't like a natural thing. And Bitcoin is a natural thing for the younger generations, which wasn't for us. We're fascinated by Bitcoin, and like, all we want to do is Bitcoin, and we want to read Bitcoin and everything. But younger kids, they're not as, I feel younger generations are not as passionate about Bitcoin itself for what it means for society, because they are growing in a world where Bitcoin is just a natural thing. It's just going to be, it's money, right? It's digital money. You don't have to ask, how does the email protocol work, and how is an email sent, and what server receives it, and how does my email client read it? Is not relevant, right? I just log into a website, and I just look at my email. And kids are more and more, it's going to be natural for them. And so I'm happy. That's what I'm very bullish on Bitcoin about. Back to your question, what could I change? Politicians being more open to Bitcoin.
Or just, get rid of politicians.
That's not going to happen.
Touche. But the magic wand, we're just going to wave the magic wand and believe that. When you hear Elizabeth Warren talk about the energy that Bitcoin uses, or you have someone bring up her whatever, it's boiling the ocean, blah, blah, blah. Like, what is your response to the Bitcoin energy argument?
Energy protects Bitcoin. Energy is what gives Bitcoin its security. And so Bitcoin has to use energy. That's great, but all you need to mine Bitcoin is cheap energy and an internet connection. And so places that typically had a lot of energy that wasn't used can now be used for Bitcoin. And so I don't think that energy argument has anything, but people, you need to explain it to because I was speaking about this with one of my family members yesterday. He asked me the same question, and I have to explain to him, energy is what gives Bitcoin its security and what protects Bitcoin from double spend. When I hear people like Elizabeth Warren, I think it's not ignorance. I don't think she's ignorant about this. There are other motives here at play that are beneficial to her agenda, or people like her agenda. And so I think you have to. I don't waste my time trying to understand like what she's people like that. Like I'm in my mind, it is very clear that Bitcoin is unstoppable and is going to be adopted by the whole world. It's just a matter of time. So these people can say whatever they want. It's okay. I don't have an opinion about it. Um, and that's it, right? People are going to attack Bitcoin from every angle, always. And the more mainstream it becomes, the more it's going to be attacked.
Absolutely. I kind of feel like we've reached that point where it is mainstream because even in the midst of this bear market, you have CNBC every day. Oh, here's the price of Bitcoin. Rafa, as we wind down, I want to give you the opportunity. Is there anything you wished we had asked you that P obviously forgot to ask you that you'd like to highlight?
I don't think so.
Thank you so much for joining us,
giving me
man.
time to speak my mind.
No, this
Absolutely.
was a lovely conversation, Rafa. For our audience, can you give them a little handoff on how they can stay up to date with anything you or the IBEX Mercado team is cooking up?
You can follow me on Twitter at Rafa_Cordon, RAFA_CORDON. And you can follow IBEX at Powered by IBEX. That's the Twitter handle, at Powered by IBEX.
Awesome, Rafa. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everyone who has been tuning in. We are not done yet. However, it is Wednesday. It is the FOMC meeting. We have Ansel and CK joining us for a new episode of Fed Watch, especially after the Bitcoin and Markets channel was shortly. I hope, Ansel, it's been returned to you from YouTube because, YouTube, the censorship platform, at it again. But before I say my goodbyes to you, I want to remind everyone we are going back to Miami, May 18th to the 20th. Come to Bitcoin 2023, lock in your tickets now and use promo code BMLive to get 10% off. If you miss Bitcoin 2022, if you miss Bitcoin 21, if you miss Bitcoin Amsterdam, do not miss Bitcoin 2023. Lock in your tickets now before prices go up. And of course, the censorship resistant print magazine is being shipped as we speak. Lock in your subscription at the Bitcoin Magazine store and use promo code BMLive to get 10% off of that. We will be back with a new episode of Fed Watch after these commercial breaks.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another exciting episode of Fed Watch. My name is Ansel Lindner. I am here, as always, with my co-host, CK. How are you doing, CK?
What's up? Doing good, boss. Exciting day. Some more Federal Reserve
day.
FOMC stuff to talk about.
Yes, today is FOMC day, so we will go into the confused that Powell is sending. He's still speaking right now. Over there, you can find it after this after you guys watch this live stream, you can go find and listen to the words straight out of the horse's mouth. Maybe we'll go through that on another episode of Fed Watch to see exactly what he's saying. But there is some mixed signals out there. What else? What else are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about charts and a couple news items like the diesel shortage. But do you have any admin notes up front here, CK?
The Bitcoin conference in less than 200 days, May 18th through the 20th. It is going to be an absolute blast. Ticket prices are going up. And if you buy your ticket today, a percentage of the ticket is going to go over to supporting the initiative over in El Salvador to get as many people seed signers as possible. So we are trying to supply them with as much money as possible so that way they can build seed signers down in El Salvador for newly minted Bitcoiners down there in conjunction with the Adopting Bitcoin conference. So go support Seed Signer, go support Bitcoin education in El Salvador by buying your ticket to Bitcoin 2023 in Miami Beach. That is May 18th through the 20th. And then, of course, the Orange Party issue of the Print Bitcoin magazine. It is hitting our warehouse tomorrow, and we will be shipping it out from there. So go and subscribe, store.bitcoinmagazine.com. Use promo code BMLive for both the ticket as well as a magazine to save. But Ansel, that's enough from me. You had some personal notes. YouTube is trying to censor you. What went down?
Well, I've been doing my live streams with Telegram and Twitter Spaces. And then a couple days ago, I think it was Monday, I decided, hey, I'm going to live stream on YouTube as well. What a great idea. And so I was doing that. And then during yesterday's live stream, after the live stream, my channel was just terminated. I tried to go to see if anybody watched the live stream, and it said a big red banner saying your account, this account has been terminated. Checked my email, saw the post in there, or saw the email in there that said, you did something against the terms of service, like a scam, or you tried to do some deceptive marketing or something like that. I was like, what? That's nothing what I said. I'm not an ICO scammer. And anyway, so my community kind of came up with the idea that I mentioned a certain politician from South America that recently there was some controversy around some of his stuff down there. And so I just mentioned it very quickly. All the headlines of mainstream media, I didn't even put any sort of conspiratorial spin on it. I did mention some globalists from Davos and how the Marxists are losing. But that's it. That's all I said on the stream. And somehow my thing was terminated. Anyway, I've appealed it. So it's up to YouTube now. I mean, I've never had a strike on my channel. I don't mince my words either. I just, nothing has ever come up that I've never promoted different conspiracy theories. That's not my thing to talk about. So that's what happened. And hopefully I get my YouTube channel back soon.
Well, you got to tweet about it, man. That is one way to get their attention. And I'm going to, hey, if you're here, go find Ansel's tweet. Go to Ansel Lindner on Twitter and retweet it. Go yell at YouTube. Help him out.
Yeah, the YouTube team already did respond. So I saw your Telegram message. I went and tweeted about it, and the YouTube team did respond. But then they just said file an appeal. So that's already been done. So we'll see if anything comes of it. But I have set up a Rumble channel. So I know you guys are broadcasting right now on Rumble, and that's a good alternative. So I'm still doing my live streams, and they'll just be going up on Rumble and my regular podcast and that stuff.
Cheers to everyone watching on Rumble. Rumble is bigger than Bitcoin. Rumble is bigger than YouTube on some days. So you love to see it.
Hit the like button. We'll see. We'll have a competition how many likes we can get between Rumble and YouTube.
Let's do it. All right, Ansel, should we jump into it?
Yes. Okay. So basically the Fed decided to raise 75 basis points. If you're not, if you're in this, watching this live stream right now, you probably already knew that. But I live streamed this morning, and I was talking about some language I was seeing out there, like this guy, Nick Tamarius from the Wall Street Journal. He's kind of like the Fed whisperer. And he was using the term pivot a lot. That has really been kind of a trending word out there, Fed pivot. And so I was saying that it seems like if one of the biggest guys out there talking about the Fed whisperer, is mentioning this term, perhaps he's trying to nudge the Overton window that way to talk, that the Fed will pivot. So anyway, then the announcement dropped 75 basis points. People were initially, they read it and they saw some dovish language in there. I can read that out. I'll probably read that out here in a second. There was some dovish language, but then at the press conference that was still going on as we stepped on the broadcast here right now, he kind of backtracked from those dovish comments and tried to hammer home hawkishness. So you can see that he's trying to walk this fine line between getting a little bit more dovish, but hammering home on this hawkishness. So a very interesting Fed meeting. What was your takeaway from the first few minutes?
A dumb question for those new to the macro jargon. Hawkish means that they're going to continue aggressively increasing rates, and dovish means they're going to start slowing down or easing. Is that correct?
Yeah. Dovish would be stimulatory. They're going to ease. They're going to stimulate the economy, the add more liquidity to the system. And hawkish would be obviously the opposite of that. So they're going to do QT. They already are doing QT. They're going to continue doing QT, and they're continuing to raise at the same pace, 75 basis points.
All right. So I guess what do you make of this? You've been saying that the Fed will be forced to pivot. I guess, do you have some charts to kind of show that trend in progress?
Yeah, let's bring up slide number 5 if you could, Chris. And we'll go through some of these rates. So this is my rate rainbow chart, kind of showing the yield curve a little bit. And you can see that red line is the 10-year, and it is touching the top of this new Fed funds range right now. Initially, it dropped down into that range. So the top of the Fed funds range is 4% now. It goes from 3.75 to 4%. And the 10-year was at 3.95% right after this announcement. So this is the first time in this whole rate rising cycle that we're in from the Fed that the 10-year has been this low, into the Fed funds target range. Also, if you can look, actually go to slide number 4, please, Chris. That is just the 10-year is the black line, and the 3-month is the blue line. And you can see that, you can see the 10-year kind of dipping into that Fed funds range. But also you can see the 3-month is inverted above the 10-year. And that is the gold standard for imminent recession, when those two lines invert. And so it's interesting that the Fed is continuing the 75 basis point move. This right here, this slide, I think, shows why so many people were expecting something other than 75 basis points. What's your reaction to that chart?
So this chart is really similar to what we looked at last week. Obviously, you added in the Fed funds, kind of ranges there. But like you said, it's the gold standard, and the longer out should have higher yields because you have to wait longer for it. So This is obviously indicating that there's something wrong. And if the 10-year is a leading indicator and these other bonds start to lower their yield, or the market starts pricing their yields lower, then it's exactly what you say it is.
Yeah, it means there's no time preference, right? The time preference is inverted actually on this chart. But also, I put these big arrows on here because I wanted to point out that right at the beginning, or right after the previous Fed rate hike, so when they got to that range that is 3% to 3.25%, the 10-year kind of spiked and then came back a little bit. And you can see before this decision, it spiked and it's come back a little bit. I just wanted to point that out. So there is a possibility that the 10-year does reverse and continue higher. But my theory has always been that the interest rates will force the Fed to pivot. And this is what I mean. If the the 10-year, this black line, continues going down, that's going to force the Fed to stop their rate hikes unless they want to look bad and lose face, lose confidence in the market, and the Fed mythology wear off, right? So right now, everybody today was waiting with bated breath to hear what the Fed was going to do. I mean, it was crazy. It was almost eerily calm this morning out there in macro land, and everybody was waiting for what the Fed was going to do. So the Fed mythology right now is super strong. But if they continue to raise rates while the 10-year, the 30-year, even the 5-year, those start coming down and going lower than the Fed funds range, their mythology is going to blow up in their face very quickly. So will the Fed be able to raise rates despite yields coming down? We'll see. So that kind of outlines what I'm watching here, what I'm waiting for the next, like I would say, 2 to 4 weeks, what the next move is for interest rates.
I mean, it really is fascinating to, be sitting here with you over the course of this entire rate increase period. And you've been forecasting this the whole time. So it's very interesting to see the 10 years start dipping down. And I'll be very interested to see, how the Fed and how the market responds when the difference between what the Fed is, reporting rates are, and then what the market is pricing them at, when that starts to really deviate. I'm very interested to see what the market responds and how quickly the Fed acts too.
Absolutely. So should I read through the Fed comments, what the announcement actually says? I think this is interesting for people. All right. So I will, in the write-up to this show, I will include a link to this, but you guys can find it on the federalreserve.gov website. So they have their press releases, and this is just their FOMC statement. So I'll read through this. So recent indicators point to modest growth in spending and production. Job gains have been robust in recent months, and the unemployment rate has remained low. Inflation remains elevated, reflecting supply and demand imbalances related to the pandemic, higher food and energy prices, and broader price pressures. So that's the first paragraph, and I'll just point out they don't say money printing here. They call this inflation, but it's all this, the supply and demand imbalance is due to pandemic, high food and energy, and broad price pressures, but not money printing. All right, Russia's war against Ukraine is causing tremendous human and economic hardship. The war and related events are creating additional upward pressure on inflation and are weighing on global economic activity. The committee is highly attentive to inflation risks. Okay, once again, it's the war and the sanctions, right? Not money printing. So what does the Fed have to do with all this? Let's continue. The committee seeks to achieve maximum employment and inflation at the rate of 2% over the longer run. In support of 2% over the longer run, that is an actual change. So remember, in the past, it was a asymmetric 2% target. So they would be happy with 1% inflation. Then they added the language maybe 5 years ago or 3 years ago that said it was a symmetric target of 2%. So they would fight low inflation and they would fight high inflation around the center of 2%. And that's their goal. Then it changed again after COVID hit. And they said they would be willing to endure a period over 2%. So 2% in the longer run. That means inflation expectations are at 2%. So they're okay with inflation being 4% as long as inflation expectations are at 2%. All right, let's continue. In support of these goals, the committee decided to raise the target range of the federal funds rate to 3.25% to 4%. The committee anticipates that ongoing increases in the target range will be appropriate in order to attain a stance of monetary policy that is sufficiently restrictive to return inflation to 2% over time. In determining the pace of future increases in the target range, the committee will take into account the cumulative tightening of monetary policy, the lags with which monetary policy affects economic activity and inflation, and economic and financial developments. So that actually is a change in the language that people were looking at, this word cumulative. So let me read that sentence again. In determining the pace of future increases, the committee will take into account the cumulative tightening of monetary policy. So how far have they come? How fast and how far? So that's like a cumulative tightening. The lags in which monetary policy affects take into account, I lost my place. The lags with which monetary policy affects economic activity and inflation and economic and financial developments. So they're taking into account a broad range of different things, which we've talked about here on the show, like the Swiss National Bank needing swap lines. We saw the stuff happen in the UK. The global kind of dollar liquidity is definitely on the mind of the Federal Reserve when they're making this type of decision. So cumulative tightening was a change in policy or in their verbiage here. In addition, the committee will continue reducing its holdings of Treasury securities and agency debt and agency mortgage-backed securities, as described, blah, blah, blah. So they'll continue with their quantitative tightening, which is happening at a very fast pace at this point now. All right, continuing. In assessing the appropriate stance of monetary policy, the committee will continue to monitor the implications of upcoming information for the economic outlook. The committee will to adjust the stance of monetary policy as appropriate if risks emerge that could impede the attainment of the committee's goals. So that's another important bit of verbiage. I'll read that one more time. The committee would be prepared to adjust the stance of monetary policy as appropriate if risks emerge that could impede the attainment of the committee's goals. The committee's assessment will take into account a wide range of information, including readings on public health, labor market conditions, inflation pressures and inflation expectations, and financial and international developments. All right, so that's the whole statement. And I just want to reiterate that they have changed their language to be a little bit more dovish with this cumulative tightening idea, and also that they are willing to adjust the stance of monetary policy as appropriate. So instead of saying until the job is done, it will be enough, we will conquer inflation, they say we're willing to adjust if it's appropriate. So kind of interesting changes there. And you can see how people initially, when this dropped, people interpreted this as dovish. And that's why the stock market rallied, Bitcoin rallied right away, because this was interpreted as dovish. All right, I'll stop there. CK, what do you have in response to this statement?
I mean, I just want to zoom out and point out the fact that everyone is still reading tea leaves with how they're saying things and what they might be open to doing and all this stuff. Like, that is screaming to you what the hell is wrong with this system. Marty Brandt always brings up this, when he was working as a financial analyst, how during an FOMC meeting, people were trying to analyze the color of Janet Yellen's suit. You read all of these letters. Most people don't, but you are teasing out, are they saying we will crush inflation, or are we open-minded to another strategy? And it is just absolutely ridiculous. It's like, this is how we are making capital allocation, resource allocations across a complex economy. This is why we need a system like Bitcoin. We need something that's out of their hands. We need something that anyone can interpret. There is a massive advantage of having something that anyone can interpret. So, I mean, I just think it's absolutely crazy. In terms of can I read the tea leaves as good as you? I mean, I have to kind of settle on your ability to kind of tease these things out. So, I mean, I'm really resting on your analysis here, which is that they see the yields inverting. They have to start pivoting their language. And this is something that's been called out on this show for months.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point about the kind of hollowness of the financial system if everyone's waiting on what the Fed is about to say. But it also tells you that there is so much, there's piles and piles and piles of unproductive debt out there. And they need to somehow, tweak it this way a little bit and that way a little bit to get another basis point, because there is so much unproductive debt. That's the end of the system. And so, yeah, great great points on that. I have a couple comments from people that, so from his press conference said, this is Walter Bloomberg, Deleone, or whatever on Twitter. I don't have a
Delta
link for
One.
this.
Delta One.
Oh, is it Delta One? Okay, thank you. Walter Bloomberg. Powell says time to slow may come as soon as next meeting. Big dovish statement there. Now that this other one from some other account that I can't pronounce, Powell, he says, likely we'll have a discussion of smaller hike in December. Very, very interesting. But now Peter DaCosta, is that how you say it? DaCosta, he says, quote, it is very premature to be thinking about pausing our rate hikes. We have a ways to go, from Powell. So you can see these are all mixed messaging. I think on purpose, actually. I think this mixed messaging is on purpose because the Fed doesn't want the market to be trying to front run a pivot. The Fed doesn't, I always go back to this quote from Paul Krugman, and he said this about Japan way back in the day. And he said the reason why QE didn't work over in Japan was because they didn't promise to be irresponsible enough. So they, it's expected. If something is expected, then the market isn't going to react the same way. So you have to build up this narrative that keeps people on the fence. Is the Fed going to pivot? Are they not going to pivot? Is it going to be 25 basis points? Is it going to be 75 basis points? They got to keep you on the fence because that way their monetary policy is always unexpected, and it will have the proper effect on the market. So, CK, what do you think about these quotes? Do you think I'm reading this right? I know you said you defer to my kind of analysis, but does this sound like, do I sound way off base here? How about that question?
No, I mean, no. And again, when like Fed policy is a matter of mass psychology. So it makes sense that if that is their real tool, then they have to be conducting mass psychological manipulation in order to have any effect. So that line of thinking seems to align with what their tool actually is. And that's been something that you've been teasing out on this show for a long time. Is one, their only tool is expectation management and the myth of the Fed. And then beyond that, the market is going to do what it's going to do. And the only thing the Fed can do is react. And when they do react, all they do is create more confusion. This is why we kind of talk about the monetary hurricane. So from first principles thinking, I think it makes a lot of sense. And, again, we've been calling out this outcome for a while. So again, I would say from first principles thinking, based on the assumptions that we're making, it would make sense that this is what a pivot starts to look like.
Yeah. All right. I have a few other quotes here, and these are from Wall Street Strategists. So from a Zero Hedge article, I'm going to read a few of these out. Ian Lingen at BMO Capital Markets. Cumulative tightening and lagged impact suggests that this will be the last 75 basis point hike. And in December, the move will most likely be 50 basis points. All right. From Eric Winogrand of Alliance Bernstein. This statement is clear that they would like to slow the pace of hikes. In addition to looking at the data and looking at markets, they are also now considering the cumulative impact of what they have already done. All right. Peter Bachvar, CIO at Bleakley Advisory Group. Quote, the front loading is essentially over, and rate hikes from here will be more cognizant of the new economic environment we're in with respect to the much tighter costs of capital and economic clouds that are circling. This is the Fed's way of telling us that a slowdown in the pace of future hikes is upon us. Okay, and I'll stop there. More like this. Pretty much the initial reaction was dovish, like I said. I think it's interesting. I mean, they are reading tea leaves.
And so people are saying in the chat that the yields aren't inverted.
The yields aren't inverted? The 3-month, 10-year? I'll look at it right now. unless it uninverted. Just nope, it's still at 3 basis points inverted, the 10-year 3-month. So right now it is still 3 basis points. The 10-year 2-year inversion is at 50 basis points. So it is very heavily inverted. That's the most inversion since the great financial crisis, if not even more than the great financial crisis. So no, yields are definitely inverted hardcore right now.
So correction, Powell said that yields aren't inverted.
They're saying Powell said they aren't inverted, not saying. Oh, holy cow. Very interesting. So Powell is making a as if he's not looking at the charts. Is that what you're telling me?
I guess it's just one of those things where a politician gets on screen and says, this is not what it is. The yields are not inverted, Ansel.
Or they're
Yes,
taking,
Jedi powers now.
Yeah, or like taking credit for Social Security increases as if they had something to do with it. Out there on a tweet this morning. I don't want to say politicians' names anymore on streams because I don't want to get another YouTube channel terminated.
All right.
All right.
Next.
So where should we go from here?
I mean, I think that, we can look at, I would love to look at the Bitcoin chart. We did break out of that range, but now it seems like we're back to consolidation. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's do that. Let's take a look at these charts here. If you just want to pull up chart number 1 there, Chris, please. Now, these are from earlier today. So the live stream, my live stream I did this morning on Telegram and Spaces, I showed this tightening range here, this symmetrical triangle, and that I believe there was a higher chance of this breaking up from here. If you go to the next chart, next slide, this is what it looked like in the 5-10 minutes after the FOMC announcement. And it looked like, hey, Bitcoin is going up. But right now, I just took a look at this chart and Bitcoin is actually falling out of the bottom of this. I can't bring it up on a new image here, but right now we're sitting at 20,246. So it looks like it's breaking down. But again, there's a lot of volatility around these type of meetings. And as we have detailed here, just in the first 30 minutes of this show, how much confusion there is about, was this dovish? Was this hawkish? What does this mean for the Fed pivot? What does this mean for monetary policy going forward? There's so much confusion out there. I'm not surprised that the volatility in something like Bitcoin and stocks are going to be this wild. Let me take a look real quick at stocks before I hand it back to you, CK, because we don't have a chart for stocks today. So it was initially surged as well at the FOMC meeting, but now it is falling down just barely red.
What are
for
you
the
looking
day.
at specifically?
I'm looking at the S&P 500, and for the day, it's down. Let's see. 2% on the day. So it is a pretty big day down for the S&P 500. All right, now I'll hand it back to you, CK. What are your thoughts on Bitcoin chart and the effects of this meeting?
It feels like it was sell the news event. People are anticipating big news today, big day, price pumping on that. And then the news was, okay, I guess it was interesting news, but it doesn't even matter because it was a sell the news moment regardless.
Well, kind of. I think that the initial reacting to the FOMC minute drop. So when the minutes dropped, people interpreted that cumulative type language and that they're willing to change their monetary stance as dovish. So then the markets went up. But then when Powell started speaking at the press conference and he said some of these things about, no, we're not ready to cut rates. We're not ready to stop hiking. And he got really hawkish on it. That's when markets fell. So I don't know. When I see moves like this from the Fed press conferences, it's not based on fundamentals. So you almost have to take that out, that initial reaction, the volatility that follows these types of events. You have to take that out of your process and say, okay, well, this doesn't tell me anything about fundamentals. So let's maybe look at the 7-day moving average or the 20-day moving average or something like that, because that has a lot less of this kind of noise.
That makes sense as well. And I mean, like you said, they're trying to create confusion anyways, right? So the minutes, maybe they lighten up their language, they come on television,
Yeah.
They pretend like nothing's changed. And ultimately, people just don't know what to make of it. I think what you're saying is that it doesn't really matter what they say, the rates are going down. And we can already see that in the deep inversions on the 10 and 2. And you said the 10 and 5. Correct me if I'm wrong
10,
on that.
Well, the 10 and 2 is
3 month,
inverted.
the
The 10.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Well, the 10 year is inverted with almost everything, other than maybe the 1 month. So the 4 week and 2 month maybe is not inverted, but it is inverted with everything down to the 3 month. So that's pretty significant. But yeah, the only other chart I have on this, or for macro, is the dollar. So Chris, if you want to bring up number 3.
I guess before we jump onto that, I guess I was just going to say, what you're saying is, regardless of what they do or say, it doesn't matter. The market and the rates are going to adjust down because that's the trend, and they're going to have to adjust. My question for you is, do you think? I really do think there's 2 options. They're forced to adjust. The myth of the Fed is broken, and the markets don't really respond at all, or maybe they even fall. They don't pump because the Fed is now easing. Or the option number 2 is that the trend, which is that every time they ease, market, prices skyrocket, and there's a sharp rebound, at least the trend from 2020, like that will continue, and we're gonna see risk assets turn up. I guess what's based on what you're seeing right now, and maybe even this fake out this morning, what do you make of what the market is trying to do with the news of a pivot?
Oh man. Well, I think that at least the US market is appearing to be quite robust to all of the challenges that it has been thrown at it in recent months. So we have obviously nearly a global war going on, right? We have a bunch of sanctions. We have energy crises. We have sanctions and trade wars happening, currency wars happening. Everything's happening. We also have the Fed hiking interest rates like crazy, yet somehow the economy is not falling apart. It's doing quite well. So that's why I'm saying that the Fed will stop eventually. The market knows the Fed will stop. The Fed will not raise like Paul Volcker, up to 20%. They already tell us that they're going to stop, after December or in the very first few months of 2023. So the market is looking ahead past that. So they're seeing that the economy is quite robust right now, and that the Fed is about to stop. So that's why I think that things are looking strong. I'm bullish on stocks. I'm bullish on Bitcoin, and a lot of people don't like that. That is definitely the contrarian view out there. So yeah, the thing that's hard to square with that is the 3 month 10-year inversion, because when yields are inverted, that means that it's typically a signal that there is going to be a recession coming. I think we already had a recession in the first 2 quarters of this year, and we talked about that many times on the show. I think we had a recession back then. Q3 has come out now, and it was 2.6% positive annualized for Q3 GDP. That's a pretty big number, going from negative to 2.6%. So how do I square that all with a good economy? The stock market is fairly strong. Bitcoin is not falling off a cliff. Bitcoin is actually inching its way upward, but the yields are inverted. Well, I mean, we could just have a mild recession. So maybe Q4 is negative and Q1 is slightly negative, but then two in 2023 is back positive again. So we don't have to have a very negative, like hard landing. We can have just a mild back and forth between negative and positive real GDP. Two caveats to that. I do know that GDP is not a good measurement. Okay. And within GDP, real GDP, you also have inflation measurements. So you have two kind of subpar variables that you're trying to tease out to see what growth is. So overall, I think that it is the best measurement that we have. And it does fit in with my general theory that we are going back towards a post GFC normal of low inflation and low growth. I mean, we could see what happens if we see 2 years of quarter by quarter bouncing between -1% and 1%, -1%, 1%. That's going to feel like a recession. Definitely 100%. It's going to feel like a depression because not having any growth, especially all the way back since the great financial crisis, basically we've had very low growth. It's really bad on the psychology of society, and it can feel definitely like a depression. Now that's the US, but that doesn't count for European countries, for Asian countries, South American countries. There could be all sorts of stuff happening where they go through massive recessions, but the US kind of skates by with this around 0% growth. All right, enough of that. Does that answer the question, CK?
Very in-depth answer, Ansel. Let's jump into the dollar chart.
Okay, so this is pretty much, well, I have two more charts when we talk about oil or diesel, but this one is the dollar. So if you could bring up number 3, Chris, please. All right, and so this is just showing kind of this wedge formation that we saw. We saw breakout higher, kind of struggled with staying up, and now it dipped down. In the last couple days, we did see a little bit of a rally, but then after this FOMC meeting, it has also sold off. I'm going to take a look at the live price. Okay, it hovered from that red candle all the way to being green for the day currently. So this chart is also old news. But what I thought was interesting, you can see these kind of time, these little bars with the time, and it says 20 bars. So that's 20 days. And I thought it was really interesting that from the top of that kind of correction back in July to the bottom in August was 20 days. And if you measure from the top of when we hit it in September, end of September, to the bottom just at the end of October, that was also 20 days. I thought that was very interesting. Anyway, that's all I have for the dollar. Any comments on the dollar?
No comments, sir. Let's jump into oil.
Okay, so slide number 6. I found this good summary of the diesel, the stuff going on in the diesel market. You guys have probably heard that there is a looming shortage in diesel. The price of diesel has been going up over the past few days. I got this off of oilprice.com. It's a great website. You guys should go subscribe, check it on a weekly basis to see the top stories there, because I think it gives really good insight. But here, I'll just read through this article a little bit. The U.S. diesel shortage is worsening. And then the bullet points are, the U.S. diesel shortage is worsening as distillate inventories crash to multi-year lows. U.S. refiners permanently shut down some refinery capacity at the start of the pandemic when fuel demand plunged. A diesel shortage and high diesel prices don't bode well for the global economy, which could tip into recession at some point next year. All right, now this is for the main body of the article. Multi-year low inventories and constraints in supply are exacerbating a diesel shortage in the United States, especially on the East Coast. Diesel demand continues to be strong after recovering faster than the pandemic slump, than other fuels such as gasoline, refiners say. But several factors have combined this year to deplete U.S. distillate inventories, which include diesel and heating oil. And ahead of the winter, the distillate fuel crunch is worsening. U.S. refining capacity is now lower than it was before COVID, as operable refinery capacity shrank in 2021 for a second consecutive year to stand at 17.9 million barrels per calendar day as of January 1st, 2022, according to EIA estimates. U.S. refiners permanently shut down some refinery capacity at the start of the pandemic when fuel demand plunged, while others closed facilities to convert them into biofuel refineries. Brilliant, guys. Some refineries were under maintenance this autumn, reducing the availability of products. In addition, the U.S. banned imports of all Russian energy products after the Russian invasion of Ukraine and hasn't imported any petroleum products from Russia since April. Lower refinery capacity in the U.S. since the pandemic, seasonal maintenance at refineries globally, and a major strike in France have all combined in recent weeks to create a shortage of middle distillates, not only in the U.S., but also worldwide. The world is also scrambling for diesel supply, also in view of the looming EU embargo on Russian fuel imports by sea, expected to kick in early February. A diesel shortage and high diesel prices don't bode well for the global economy, which is slowing down and could tip into recession at some point next year. Distillate fuels are used in transportation, agriculture, manufacturing, and heating. In the U.S. distillate and fuel inventories, they are about 20% below the 5-year average for this time of the year, according to EIA's latest weekly inventory report. The U.S. has just 25 days of diesel supply in reserve, with some regional markets very tight. And I can go on this article. I will link definitely in the write-up to this show. But CK, what have you heard about the diesel shortage? Have you noticed anything maybe in the headlines that has caught your attention about how bad this possibly could be?
I remember I was listening to a podcast and they were talking, or actually, no, it wasn't even a podcast. I was reading a Doomberg thread. And Doomberg is a very good account on Twitter. You should definitely go follow Doomberg. But this account really is trying to harp on the mistake that a lot of countries are doing by getting off of hardcore and I guess like leaning off of producing their own energy, leaning off of fossil fuels and hydrocarbons, and moving away from baseload energy. And he's just saying and trying to illustrate all the ways that kind of the ESG narrative around energy production is leading us into chaos. One of these threads, the one that I'm referring to now, is talking about how diesel is all cut with I think it's called something blue, but effectively what it does is it reduces the emissions, which is great. But now they're making engines that won't even work unless this like Agent Blue stuff is mixed in with the diesel, and that is having shortages. So there's a bunch of trucks that won't even run on just diesel, which is having shortages. But beyond that, another byproduct or another solvent that you have to mix into it, and that has shortages too. So forgive me for some missed details on this. I'm definitely not a diesel expert, but just driving around town, you see diesel prices are more expensive than gasoline prices. I remember that didn't used to always be the case.
Yeah.
And you do know that there's massive strain on our shipping capabilities and logistics capabilities and trucking capabilities. So, throwing more strain into logistics there, throwing more turbulence in with spikes in these prices and political fallout of war, sanctions, etc. It's just making it even more difficult to operate, and it's creating a really cataclysmic environment because we all depend on this fuel source. This fuel source is effectively the bloodline that is flowing resources throughout the globe in the United States. So it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah, I mean, diesel powers trucks. It can power trains. It can power ships. I mean, it powers everything in the the transportation supply chains. And yeah, it's crazy. Man, I just wish this would wake some people up, because from what I read there, that goes on on that article. So I do recommend everyone check that out. But it was basically sanctions. Sanctions are the big thing. That is what is driving this. Also, cutting
And lockdown.
and lockdown regulations to keep from these plants coming back up, because they said they had to make biofuels out of this, or make these refineries into biofuel factories instead of refining diesel. I mean, it's just one mess up after another. I do have a couple charts. Do you want to take a look at those before we have to wrap?
Let's hit them. Absolutely.
Okay, so the first chart, number 7 there, Chris, this is the diesel short-term chart. So kind of you can see it goes from basically this whole year. This is a daily chart. New York front month diesel prices, on the CME. So this is commodity prices. It has spiked recently. It hasn't gotten all the way back up to where it was in April, which I think is very interesting. But there's a huge gap here in the last couple of days. So I don't know what is exactly up with that. But I also have a longer term chart. If you go to the next slide, the longer term chart is, you can see back at 2008. So the great financial crisis looks very similar to the oil chart, but it has, the oil chart, but it has really come up a lot higher than oil has gotten. So diesel is at all-time highs versus oil not at all-time highs. Interesting. So CK, any comments on that chart, or should we wrap it up for the day?
It looks like a pretty scary chart, man. There's not a lot of support or resistance either way.
Right, but what I always say is that if it's at record highs, it's more likely to go the other direction than, continuing up. So you can never call the top of a blow off, like a blow off top. You can never call the exact top. But if it's getting close, the time frame is short, and you will have a reversal. So I think it's bad news that said 25 days left of supply of diesel. But overall, man, I'm not worried. I think the U.S. has all of this capacity for oil. We can open up new refineries. We might have a period where we have some subsidy and higher prices, but overall, I would be terrified if I were in Europe. I mean, these are very bad situations for other places, much more than the United States. So that's all I got for this, man.
Just to translate, what you're saying is like the diesel situation is probably going to get worse, but the U.S. will be on the less bad side of it and has capacity to recover, whereas a lot of places globally don't.
Yes, and I mean, prices move for a reason. Rising prices aren't a bad thing, and falling prices aren't a good thing. Prices move all the time for many reasons. Rising prices mean something. They should tell the market something. And so I don't really see this as a bad thing. I mean, it's going to hurt. You're going to have to tighten your belt a little bit. It's going to hurt maybe the lower income people, and that's always a horrible thing. But overall, I don't see rising prices as necessarily bad. I know I sound like a horrible person when I say that.
No, I mean, no, you're just thinking in a multidimensional way about things versus, the immediate gratification, which is I want this for cheap, which obviously efficiency brings cheaper prices as well. But demand destruction also brings lower prices because people get desperate. No one's selling, no one's buying. And that destroys that lowers prices too, which is the only thing the Fed actually can attempt to do right now. So they're saying we need higher prices, whether they're making it happen or not. Ansel, where can people find you?
On Twitter at Ansel Lindner. Check out Telegram, t.me/Bitcoin and Markets. And now all my live streams are going up on my podcast, Bitcoin and Markets. So just search for that in any podcast app, and on Rumble, new channel on Rumble since my YouTube was terminated. That's it. CK, how about you?
YouTube, get Ansel back. All right. This guy has so much alpha. Also, subscribe to Bitcoin Markets. Y'all, you can find me at Twitter, or on Twitter at CK_Snarks. Also involved in everything we do, Bitcoin Magazine and Bitcoin Conference. So go to both. Go buy a Bitcoin Magazine. Go to the Bitcoin Conference. Ticket prices are going up. Use code BMLive to save. All right. Peace.